Turn your light down. 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 That's a little better. That's a little better. That's a little better. That's a little better.
John, you ready to start?
Okay. You recording?
We both are, yes.
Very good. All right, good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Township of Montclair Planning Board. In accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and by sending a copy to the newspaper designated for the township for notices. Electronic notice of the meeting is also provided by posting a copy of the meeting notice along with access instructions on the township website and also attached to the main access door of the municipal building. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streamed live and will be available for on-demand viewing on YouTube. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and that we're obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for an official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board can legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Members of the public will initially be automatically placed on mute until such time as the meeting is open for public question or comment. At such time, members of the public will be given access and unmuted, and they may provide verbal questions or comments as appropriate. In the event verbal communication is not possible because of technical limitations, members of the public can also direct their questions or comments to Ms. Talley, the board secretary, via the chat or question or answer functions on the meeting platform, or by email as a last resort at jtalley@montclairnjusa.org. Again, that's JTALLEY @montclairnjusa.org. We have a bit on our agenda this evening, so the first thing is our roll call, and I am here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Counselor Schlager.
Here.
Ms. Willis.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Okay. And we also have Mr. Neese.
I am here.
And we have Tommy Sibilia, who's the assistant planner. I'll be working with us on several matters that are on the agenda tonight.
Okay. Next up, we have the minutes from our March 28th meeting.
I did not receive any changes to the minutes.
Wow.
I'm honored. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right. Let's see. Next, we have two resolutions up. First one for Anthony Sapp, 29 Cedar Avenue.
I believe we received a couple comments from Vice Chair Brodock on the resolution. Very minor changes.
Minor but important. Thank you, Keith.
Welcome.
Are there any additional changes? Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Move.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And abstentions? Okay.
And next, we have the resolution regarding the adoption of the draft Bellevue Theatre Redevelopment Plan by the Township Council.
I just want to note that I have amended the plan the plan you received had been amended to add all of the comments from the HPC identifying the historic design aspects of the theater that are important. So that was one of the recommendations of the planning board, and they were very helpful in providing some comments to amend the redevelopment plan. So is there a motion to approve the resolution to recommend the redevelopment plan to the council?
Motion?
Is that Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'll abstain.
Who was abstaining?
That's me, John.
Okay. All right, good. Okay. I think the next item on our agenda, I believe, was a discussion of returning to in-person meetings. We did discuss this at the last meeting, and I know, John, you had told us that you didn't have a problem because you were not there. But Carol, we didn't have a chance to discuss it with you. The council, I believe, is going back to in-person meetings starting in May. And we have the opportunity, the planning board has the opportunity to start going back to in-person meetings as well. So I think we heard from everybody that they were open to going back to in-person meetings, but if the numbers, the COVID numbers started to increase again, to keep the option to go back to remote meetings in place in case the COVID numbers start to rise.
And I appreciate that you paid me the courtesy of getting my opinion when I was absent. So thank you very much. But yes, I think that's a reasonable plan.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so if that's the consensus among everybody, then I will plan our first meeting in May as an in-person meeting. No, not the first person. I think it's the first meeting in May after the council meeting. Okay, because I know by the time the council meets in person, everything will be set up. So hopefully we'll be able to go back in person. I just need to coordinate that with the council and with our IT department.
To
Okay.
echo my friend Ms. Willis, that sounds very reasonable.
Jeff, it's been a long slog for you to get this.
I got to tell you, I'm really happy with the way that we did this. We did it collegially, we did it collaboratively, we did it,
And I do
consultatively.
appreciate the courtesy that you paid me. Thank you very much.
We want everybody to feel comfortable, so as much as we can. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a public hearing on the area in need of redevelopment study for block 3307, lot 7, and block 3304, lot 1. If you'll give me a moment, we have a PowerPoint presentation to summarize the study, and Tommy Sibilia will be making that presentation. Tommy, I think I just made you the presenter. So you should be able, Tommy, you should be able to share your screen and present the PowerPoint. There we go.
All right,
So-
everybody can see the PowerPoint presentation.
I can see it. Just let me give a little bit of background information. In
And-
August,
Janice, maybe before you do that, I want to let the board know that my company does have a business relationship with one of the tenants here. And so I spoke to Arthur, and neither of us see it as a conflict of interest, but I thought I should let everybody know.
Okay, okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. So in August of 2021, the council adopted a resolution asking the planning board to look at these two properties to determine whether or not they meet the criteria of an area in need of redevelopment. This analysis is a very structured analysis. The statute is clear. There's 8 criteria by which properties have to be evaluated to determine if it meets any or all of the criteria. So Tommy and I went out and did a very thorough analysis of the history of the two properties and its current conditions, which is why it's a pretty extensive report, even though it's only 2 properties. So anyway, so this is the public hearing. We did notice the property owners that this public hearing is taking place this evening. We did notice both this meeting date and meeting information in the Montclair Times and the Star Ledger twice as required by statute. So I think what we should do is let Tommy go through the presentation. And if we could, to get through all the material, if the board members have questions as we go through, germane to exactly what's being presented, we'll try and answer those questions. But I'd like to get through the whole presentation before we really get into the in-depth analysis and any other specific questions. Okay, so Tommy.
Can I just ask one question?
Sure.
You said that the council decided that they wanted to do this study, but how did that come to the council? You know, we talked about last go round the Bellevue Theatre. They had owners there who wanted to do something, so they came to the council or they came to you and asked about how the town could help them. How did this area come to the attention of the council to make even a recommendation for a study?
I believe the contract purchasers approached the council saying they were interested in redeveloping the property. They were interested in working with the township to develop a redevelopment plan for this property. And the council was open to that, clearly, because they followed with this resolution asking the planning board to do this study. Now, I just want to, redevelopment is a 2-phase process. Before we can even consider what goes into a redevelopment plan, we need to first designate it as an area in need of redevelopment, because you can't do a redevelopment plan if it's not a redevelopment area.
Right.
So we're not talking about the future use of this property. We're not talking about what the redevelopment plan could include or may include, because that's putting the cart before the horse. This is a fact-based presentation, a fact-based analysis, and clear at the end of the evaluation, the planning board has to consider, does it or does it not meet the criteria? And then that's what you make your recommendation to the council, and the council is the entity that ultimately decides whether or not it does.
Janice?
Yeah.
There is a choice between a redevelopment in need of redevelopment versus in need of rehabilitation. Can you tell me what's the difference in terms of why we would choose one criteria over the other?
Well, there's a different level. There's a different level of evaluation that goes for an area in need of rehabilitation. It's a much simpler determination. It has to do with the age of the utilities and the age of the structures, and whether or not it needs improvement. It's a much heavier lift to do to determine a property in area in need of redevelopment as opposed to an area in need of rehabilitation. Both designations enable the township to adopt redevelopment plans for those properties. The difference is an area in need of redevelopment allows the property owner to enter into a financial agreement with the township and enter into a payment in lieu of taxes, which we've done with other properties. If the property is designated an area in need of rehabilitation, that option's off the table. There's no pilot agreement, there's no financial agreement. The only thing is, as we talked about when we did the Bellevue Theatre project, is you can do the short-term tax exemption, which is freezing the property taxes and scheduling the increase over 5 years.
Janice, would an area in need of redevelopment still be subject to the same statutory requirements of another building in terms of, HPC demolition requirements, the statutory requirements? Would it be subject to, could the planning board determine the zoning restrictions, like the height requirements, or what happens if we approve this?
Well, nothing happens if we approve this. You're not approving it. You're just making a recommendation to the council. If the council decides it meets the criteria, it's a designation. It's an area in need of redevelopment. It's a designation. And then the next step is to do a redevelopment plan. And the good thing about redevelopment plans is because you can go beyond what you can do through a zoning ordinance. As you know, from our redevelopment plans that we've adopted, we have extensive design standards.
Well, this is my first this would be my first one, so
Right,
I want to make sure that
so
I'm getting this correct and I know what the stakes are and implications.
So that would be the next step. Once it's designated, then we say, okay, it's an area in need of redevelopment. Now let's work on the redevelopment plan. And the way we've approached this in the past is come up with a plan for not just for the design of the building, but there's got to be a public purpose. When you do redevelopment, and this is when I did meet with the property owners, I said, you have to bear in mind, we can do a redevelopment plan, but it has to advance a public purpose. We're not there yet, but when we get to that redevelopment plan, what community objectives are we achieving through this redevelopment plan?
Michael, to address your specific question, the zoning issues get determined when we work on the plan.
Exactly.
So we get to set what the zoning is. I mean, and overlay it on what the adopted zoning is for the rest of the township. So we can make it more restrictive, we can make it more liberal, we can add to it, we can subtract from it, but we would be the ones who determine in the plan as to what the zoning would be. And again, then the council has to approve it, has to adopt.
Thank you, Chair. And just if on the other question about the HPC jurisdiction, would that be if this is a proposed historic district, would HPC still have some jurisdiction over this, or would they be part of the process?
We would always include HPC as part of the process for any redevelopment plan.
Right.
And would the demolition statute still apply if a business is proposed to be demolished?
I would presume it would, unless there's a specific, the only way it could not is if there's a specific statement in the redevelopment plan that supersedes that. And I don't anticipate, I would not.
There would have to be a really specific reason in order for that, in order for us to adopt a plan that says that we're not gonna go to that. And again, we put the plan together, but it's the council that adopts it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Janice.
I have another question. Janice, you said you met with the developer.
I did.
Is that where that picture of the 8-story building came from?
I never saw that picture before. No, they didn't present that picture to me. I've never seen that picture.
And for those of you who don't know what that picture is, could you please just explain, where that picture was seen, where it was posted?
Well, it was posted in Baristanet.
Right. So not everybody in the town reads Baristanet. So just wanted to, for everybody who's in attendance, to understand what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, I don't read Facebook, so I don't know if it was on Facebook as well, but it was certainly on Baristanet, and apparently EDC members saw it. So, because Peter Jacobellis in the Bristonet article mentioned that he saw the picture. So there seemed to be some murkiness around the background to how this came before the council, how it's coming before us. And I'd like that to be cleared up.
Okay, well, I don't know where Peter saw that picture, because I didn't, when I discussed it.
Maybe it was given to him by Bristonet people. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say-
So Robin, can
Yes.
you shed some light on what happened at the
Yes.
council?
Yes, I can't, I could shed some light on what happened at the EDC, because I sit on the EDC with Councilman Yakubellis and the mayor. That photo that you saw, and I saw it too on Bristonet, I saw it on Facebook because I'm on Facebook. That photo, I did not see at the EDC meeting. I believe that photo is an old photo from, I don't know who the developer is who Janice met with at this time, but I believe that that photo is from another developer from about a year or two ago that that had that rendering made and had that architectural plan made. But as far as I know, I have not seen anything from this proposed developer. I don't know who the developer is. I don't know their name. So this came before the EDC, and we made the recommendation after Janice made a presentation of this area. We made a recommendation for the council to pass a resolution to bring this to the planning board to review, which is what we're doing tonight.
And
the
Robin, when you
council had
said that she
very little
made,
discussion. I'm sorry?
Robin, when you say that she made a presentation about the area, what do you mean about the area?
Janice made a presentation to the EDC, explaining the buildings that we're talking about, the areas that we're talking about, and it was.
It's a factual presentation about what currently
Yes.
exists there?
Yes, that would be more accurate. Yes. The EDC asked to perhaps include other areas, which one of them was the soccer dome. We asked maybe that should be included. We asked that maybe the open space, I guess that's Erie Park, that's across from what was the jazz club, that area where that grassy area, that little park. We asked that maybe that should be included. And then subsequently, we decided not to include those. And the owner of the soccer dome was, he had no plans to, he's keeping it what it is. So those two areas were taken out, and just these areas were included and moved forward for the council. But that's correct, Chair Nguyen. It was a factual, Janice went through the list of what's there, how, there's lots of vacancies there. There's some abandoned areas there. And, that's what she presented to us. But at no
Chair
time
slash
did I ever see
Arthur.
that photo of that building at that meeting.
So, Mr. Chairman and Arthur, I have no idea what the answer to this question is, but would it be appropriate at this time to grab that photo and just put it in the record? Because we've all talked about it. It's not in the record yet. It's going to, we know the public is going to bring it up. We might as well have it in the record.
Well, we can certainly do that. For myself, I will say that the first time I ever saw that, and it's not a photograph, it's a rendering. The first time I saw it was in an email from a member of the public that I received on Sunday morning. I would also like to clarify that based on the information I have, there never was a developer per se for the large property. The property is owned today, as it has been for many, many years, by Howard Silver. There may have been potential sales of the property along the way, and as I understand it, maybe that rendering was by one of the people who was being considered or was considering buying the property. But sure, I don't see any reason why we could not put that rendering into the record, because it is going to be discussed apparently by many people. So I don't know what evidentiary value it has, but since it's just going to be discussed, it may as well be included in the record.
Pretty much what I was thinking.
Right.
On all parts of that sentence.
Okay. Mr. Ness, at this moment in time, that property is owned by Howard Silver?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So if there is a potential developer that he or she at this time does not own it, so it's purely.
That's correct. That's my understanding. Mr. Silver has owned the property for many, many years, even back to the time when a gentleman by the name of Richard Cedar came before this board back in 2014 on a subdivision application.
Oh.
So, and his ownership extends back earlier than that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And Robin, one other question. How did the matter come up before the EDC?
How
Do you know?
did it?
Yeah.
In my recollection, I believe it came from Janice, from Miss Callie.
It came from me. I keep the EDC
Yeah.
apprised of our various
Yeah.
redevelopment projects, and as we were, I got my involvement didn't start until after I got the resolution from the council in August of 2021. And so I got the resolution. I informed the EDC that I did not have the capacity or the funds to do the study. After the resolution was adopted, I did meet with the contract purchaser just to see what was going on. And clearly, and what they presented was not what was shown today. And we just talked concepts. And essentially what I did was I explained the process. That's all they said they want to develop the property. I said, okay, but we're not there yet. We have a process we have to go through. And what I did, the EDC meets monthly, and I let them know what's going on. And I think I shared with them my discussions with the contract purchasers, and then I've shared with them, as Tommy came on board and we started working on this project, I just kept them apprised of what we're working on so that nobody is surprised that the planning board is having this public hearing this evening.
And
Can I ask
going
one more
back one
question?
step further,
Sorry, Chair.
going back one step further, Robin, do you remember when the resolution came up before the board about doing a study?
I do, and that was, and I have a copy of it here, I believe, in the packet that we all received from Janice. I believe there's a copy of that resolution in here. It would have the date, which I don't recall.
I'm pretty sure it's August 21st.
August, okay. Oh, Janice has a very good memory. And
August 24th, I'm sorry.
okay. And but so that would have been, that's I guess here it is. Here it is. I have it's in our packet that we all received. It's on the back of page 37. You will see the resolution authorizing the study. It was moved by the mayor, seconded by Councilman Hurlock, and all of the council said yes to move forward with that resolution. And you should all have a copy of it in case you want to refer back to it. And it's signed by the township clerk. But if you're
Okay.
asking, Chair Wynn, how we got the resolution in the first place? Is
Yeah,
that-
what made the council consider, the matter in the first place?
Right, I believe it was at a suggestion of the planner.
No,
No?
I believe it came from the finance committee.
Who's on the finance
Oh.
committee? Who's on the finance committee?
The finance committee is Deputy Mayor Hurlock, Councilman David Cummings, and the mayor. So I did not know that that's where it came from.
Yeah, because it didn't come from me.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, but so if it's the finance, those are the three people on the finance committee.
So it's logical to assume that one of those three people was approached by a developer who wanted to do something with this parcel. Is that
Well,
correct?
it's my understanding that the developer went to the finance committee to talk to them.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, and the finance committee said it sounds like a good idea to invest, in this large piece of property, this large tract of land next to the Walnut Street train station. And that's where the resolution was drafted. This is what I've been told, and that's how it went to the council, and where we are leads us to where we are today.
Okay, another question for you, Janice. Is that the evaluation of this study on the last couple of pages? Is that your opinion only?
Yes, it's my opinion only.
And if the planning board today says that they disagree with a redevelopment plan, what happens then?
You mean, if the planning board disagrees with the designation?
Yes.
That's fine. The planning board, your role at the end of this presentation is you consider the two parcels. Does each parcel either meets the criteria or does not meet the criteria?
Right.
That's it.
Right. And if we say,
And then if we don't, and then I think to answer your question, if we don't agree that it meets the criteria, that's what we report back to the Township Council.
Right.
And it's from there that council still, excuse me, sorry, council still has the ability to say that this area is in need and that we should go ahead and develop a plan, but they would have to do that in the face of our objection or lack of recommendation, which of course bears upon how that move would be viewed going forward.
and what ward is this property in?
Second ward.
Oh.
I believe, I believe, every once in a while,
Yeah.
it's a surprise of a different, an odd cut of a ward, but I believe it is the second ward. Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Was there
I think
another question?
I'm done for now.
Well, I'm sorry. Are you okay, Cornell?
I'm done for now. Yep.
Okay. Was there somebody else who had a question on the board?
Yeah, Chair, just one more question that I was trying to understand. If this is designated an area in need of redevelopment, there are currently, several companies that have leases there. There are businesses that are there. Would a redevelopment plan supersede those contracts, those leases, and would those businesses have to essentially move?
No.
Art, do you want to address that?
The answer is no. The redevelopment plan cannot interfere with a contract that exists between a landlord and a tenant.
Now, what it does do, it changes what can be done with the land according to how the plan gets structured. So at the end of the day, once the plan is done, a tenant might consider it to be undesirable to be there because it doesn't align with what they thought it was going to be, or they might be, induced to, well, if you want to do this and you give me X, then I'll go my way, but nobody can force them.
I see. Okay.
And it doesn't negate any other legal obligations that pre-exist.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Arthur.
John.
Anyone else?
John.
Yeah, I still have a little bit of a question, and I was looking at, say, the criteria for redevelopment number 1. That sounds like the criteria that sounds like also rehabilitation, and this is why I asked the question before, what is the difference between the two? In terms of, could the board say that what can be done under, I know that there's a financial advantage of doing it under redevelopment, but other than the financial advantage, what is the other advantage of taking a lesser step than condemning the area and doing something different with it?
Okay, Carol, if I could, this is what's called a non-condemnation redevelopment study. In the resolution from the council, they've said that ask the planning board to determine whether or not this meets the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment, but without considering without giving the township the ability to condemn the property. Based on case law, you have to treat redevelopment studies that deal with condemnation a little bit differently than you deal with properties that do not deal with condemnation. So number 1, condemnation is off the table. township's not going to condemn this land and acquire it, either one of these properties, because that was not part of the direction in the resolution from the council. The planning board can only consider whether or not it meets the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment, because that's what the council directed the planning board to do. If the planning board says no, and the council, then it's up to the council. The council can decide whether or not they agree with the planning board or if they want to go in a different direction. They can always come back and do an area in need of rehabilitation, but the area in need of rehabilitation designation, which is a lighter lift, does not provide an opportunity for a financial agreement with the payment in lieu of taxes. So that's the main difference here.
So I have another question,
Thank you.
just since you mentioned about the taxes. I looked this up and it looks like the taxes on this parcel is $133,000. Is this being paid? Or are they taxes in arrears?
They're, as far as I know, they're current on their taxes.
Okay.
I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know if anybody's interested in entertaining a motion to table this until we're back in person?
Until we get what, Jeff? I didn't hear that.
Until we're back in person. There's a lot of public interest in this. It's sort of the most controversial thing we've taken up in a few months. I'm just wondering, I haven't talked to anybody about this. I'm just wondering if anybody's interested in a motion to table
Well,
this until we're back in person.
We've got 26 attendees here, which I think is for, at least for these virtual hearings, is quite a bit. I don't know. I would hesitate to do that because that somehow suggests that what we're doing here isn't as effective as what we would be doing in person. And I wouldn't want to make that suggestion that somehow for the past couple of years, what we've been doing was less effective than.
No, I didn't mean to make that. I agree with you that would be an inappropriate and wrong suggestion. I'm bringing it up only because the light at the end of the tunnel is there, and I figured since we are going back in person, I thought I'd bring it up. I don't feel strongly about it. I just.
And again, I think we have to remain focused, as Janice said at the top of the discussion, that we're just this evening looking to see whether or not these properties meet the statutory requirements. That's it. And either we feel they do, or either we feel that they don't, and then it goes back to the council for the next step. So we're really preliminary here. There's a lot more steps to come down the line where, as this develops, people will have more than one opportunity to be heard on this further if it continues past this point.
Just one more question.
Carmel, you can ask as many questions as you can. You don't have to say it's just one more, because we know that you've got more, so that's okay.
Okay, I understand that there's the potential to have a related study on the parking lot. Is that true?
The council, Robin, I would check the council agenda last Tuesday. I think the council is either considering a resolution or adopted a resolution to have the planning board determine whether or not Erie Park is an area in need of rehabilitation.
Does that mean the park or the parking lot?
It's that lot. And part of it includes the parking lot, part of it includes Erie Park. It's that lot.
Right.
The rationale being the council wants to tie improvements to that park to any redevelopment on this parcel. So if we're doing a redevelopment plan, they want to be able to include that park and open space in the redevelopment plan. But that's not part of tonight's, that'll be a future consideration, because that's not, I don't know if they've actually adopted that or if is discussed for adoption at the second meeting this month. But that's probably coming down the pike, that other additional lot.
And I think that the meaning behind that is to beautify that park and to make it more appealing, to make it more user-friendly, things like that. It would that would be the meaning behind that. it's, can use, for lack of a better word, a little, sprucing up and redoing. Would include park benches, trees, shrubs, things like that, to make it, a nicer area.
I'm
Can
not
I?
quite, I'm not quite following that, because if
Mhm.
you look at that with, you're tying Erie Park to the parking lot, that means you would have to redevelop the parking lot and put another building at the parking lot.
No, it doesn't.
No, it
No,
doesn't.
no,
Doesn't?
never.
No,
I mean, I'll
That-
never say
doesn't mean
never,
that at
but
all.
no.
does not mean
No.
that at all, Tony.
Mm-mm.
Oh, so then by putting the park into a redevelopment area, why is it easier for the town to improve the park?
No, the township, we could tie that to the developer and say,
What is the developer developing?
well, we don't know because we don't have a redevelopment plan yet. It would be included
I
in the
guess that's my
redevelopment.
point.
But we could task the developer to improve the parking lot, to
Right.
repave it, to restripe it. It doesn't mean that it has to change the use of it. At the end of the day, it means that we could shift the financial burden on making sure that the parking lot is 100% up to par to the developer, as opposed to being on the part of the township.
Okay, let me
Chairman, you're
rephrase
talking
it.
about the developer, this redevelopment plan?
If we
Any.
could choose to make the redevelopment plan. See, we don't have a redevelopment plan now. That's, as Janice says, that's down the pike. We haven't gotten to that yet. But our redevelopment plan could conceivably include something. It could totally ignore the parking lot, which would mean that it would stay the same. We could still address the part, even though it's part of the same redevelopment plan. It would be subject to all of the zoning that we could apply to the area. We could do nothing. We could make special regulations with respect to it. We could, we have an open book. That's one of the beauties about the redevelopment plan. We have the ability to write something custom for this particular parcel, these particular parcels of land that we're talking about. But we're not even there yet. We don't know who a developer what a developer would want to come in here and do. And quite frankly, when we write the plan, that's not something that necessarily controls the plan either, because if we think, as a board, that something else should be done other than what the redeveloper might propose as a solution, we have the ability to write the plan in that way. And then if the developer doesn't like it, then they can go away, But again, we're really not at that. We're really not at that phase yet. We're at the phase the council has asked us to whether or not these parcels meet the statutory criteria.
May I
That's it.
rephrase my question, because I think the point was not, I didn't make the point well
Okay.
enough. So this parcel 2 and parcel 1, the redevelopment study that's in front of us, does not include Erie Park.
It's not a study, number one. It's really, well, it's a study, but it's really just the factual the factual status of what's existing there. Yeah, I know.
It's a study.
I've got it up on my screen.
We have
Yeah,
a study
but it's
that's in front of us to see if
Right.
this meets.
Right.
And it was mentioned that Erie Park is not included in this. So if it's not, if this study is adopted and then a redevelopment plan is adopted for parcel 1, parcel 2, there's no tie into Erie Park to have this developer fix up Erie Park. So my
when
question
we
is-
adopt a plan, Tony, we can, as part of adopting that plan, we can pull in adjacent parcels. We have the
Okay.
ability to pull in adjacent parts, even though they weren't a part of the original
That's my
study,
question.
because
Okay.
they bear on what we did study.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be a part of this study to be included in, okay, got it.
Okay.
Is there any thought to, when we think about the parking lot, to change it from its surface parking lot to a deck?
We haven't even gotten there yet. That's all of that is so premature. I mean, and there's no point in thinking about that until we decide whether or not it's eligible for redevelopment. And we try and take this one step at a time, so that everybody and everything gets a fair shake and a thorough, unbiased review.
John,
Yes.
so one final thing before we start our presentation. I did get a message from the attorney representing the property owners here that are part of this study. And he said, his comment was that the rendering was not prepared by his client or by the contract purchaser of the property. That's the rendering that was in the emails that went out today and that was published on Baristanet. He said, we have no idea who prepared the rendering or for what purpose, but it does not reflect what may be proposed for this property. We had nothing to do with the preparation of that rendering. So he sent me that in the chat as a chat message, since we haven't opened it up to the public yet.
For what it's worth.
For what it's worth.
Board, do you have any other questions that, that are on your mind? That, because I don't mind spending time on this. I think it's important for everybody here to hear these questions and answers. It helps the whole process. So does anybody have any other questions or concerns that they want to pose now before we start getting into the presentation?
I do have one more question, I think, and that is, Janice, I know you ran around with Tommy to look at this property, but you did not have any engineers with you when you ventured to make an opinion about the state of the infrastructure, right? It was just you're looking at this site, and it's totally your opinion on this site.
Absolutely. It was based on the things that we observed, and we documented, obviously, with extensive photographic evidence. It had not done an engineering study.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody else? Anybody else? Or are we good for the moment? Okay, I'll take the silence as we're good for the moment. Let's try and go through the presentation. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions as the process continues.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me and see the screen okay?
Yes.
All right. So good evening. It's nice to meet many of you for the first time. I don't think I've even seen some of you before, so it's nice to virtually be able to meet some of you. I'm the new assistant planner, as Janice said. I helped put together this area in need of redevelopment study with Janice, and so I'm going to be presenting it tonight for you.
I just want to say Tommy's done a great job with the HPC, and he's fit in seamlessly. Graham was a big loss, but Tommy's filled in admirably. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
And Tommy, welcome to your first planning board meeting.
Thank you. Thank
Trial
you.
by fire.
You guys are very thorough. You covered actually a lot of what I'm going to go over in this presentation, but for thoroughness, I'm going to go through it anyway. All right. So we touched on some of this, and although most of you are aware of the redevelopment process, I'm quickly going to go through the steps as it relates to this site before I jump into the study area itself. So on August 24th, 2021, Council authorized the Planning Board and Planning staff to conduct an area in need of redevelopment study in the delineated study area through the adoption of Resolution R21-178, which was included in your packets. The Planning Board, through Planning staff, prepared the study and then must hold a public hearing on the study, which is what we're here doing tonight. The Planning Board will then make a determination of whether they believe the area is indeed in need of redevelopment, and then adopt a resolution with their recommendations to council.
So may I just interrupt? The planning board didn't prepare the study. The planning department prepared the study. So that's
correct. Correct.
You might want to change that.
It's important to note, as Janice said, that at this stage, the potential future use of the property is not relevant and not part of the discussion for tonight. Even though it may come up, it's not really part of what this study is that we're presenting. So following review by the Planning Board, Council will review the study and the recommendation, and they'll adopt a resolution designating all, some, or none of the area in need of redevelopment. If deemed partially or fully in need of redevelopment, the township seeks approval from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, deeming the site a redevelopment area, after which a redevelopment plan is prepared. And the preparation of redevelopment plan, as Janice said, is a process that is open to the public. New Jersey Statutes Annotated, or NJSA, Section 40A, 12A is known as the Local Redevelopment and Housing Law. 12A4 outlines the powers of municipalities regarding redevelopment, which include conducting an area in need of redevelopment study, which the planning department has done for this subject area, and declaring an area in need of redevelopment if the review criteria are met. 12A8 empowers municipalities to lease or convey land in a redevelopment area to a third party without a public bidding process. Redevelopment provides a municipality with greater zoning power, which you guys discussed a bit already. The municipality in the redevelopment plan can set specific bulk standards for the area and can provide more detailed regulations such as architectural requirements.
I have another question for you. I'm sure there's many more, sections of this law. You bring out the lease or convey land without a public bidding process. Is there a specific land within this potential redevelopment plan that would need to be leased or conveyed without a public bidding process?
That would be if we either own the land or acquire the land through condemnation. And at this point, we don't own the land, and this is a non-condemnation redevelopment study, so that's not available for this particular project.
So that number 2 bullet is really not pertinent to this discussion.
Right.
Okay. Is there any reason it's in there then?
I think it was a carryover from a previous presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, so redevelopment carries with it financial incentives to redevelopers, such as payments in lieu of taxes or pilots, which are essentially the taxes that would be due on the property prior to improvements being made, which Janice touched on already. Section 12A5 of the local redevelopment and housing law delineates the 8 review criteria for determining an area in need of redevelopment. These criteria are the basis for the evaluation of each property in the study area that we completed. Criteria A through H are paraphrased here on this slide. This is not the full language. The resolution by council would need to state that any of the following conditions are found to be able to deem an area in need of redevelopment. So I'll just quickly go through these. Criterion A is dilapidation or unwholesome living or working conditions. B is vacant commercial buildings that are not able to be leased because of their condition. C is land that's publicly owned or land that has been vacant for 10 or more years that is unlikely to be developed. D is dilapidation or obsolete and or faulty layout that is detrimental to the community. E, stagnant or unproductive area. F, properties destroyed by natural disasters. G, New Jersey urban enterprise zone, which Montclair is not. And H, supporting smart growth statute. So I'm going to go through a more detailed description of the criteria that are relevant to this study later on in the presentation. This slide provides an overview of the study area, which comprises 2 properties. Property 1 is block 3307, lot 7, which is 2 through 10 Erie Street and 7 Oak Place at the corner of Label Street and Erie Street. Property 2 is block 3304, lot 1, which is 121 Forest Street at the corner of Oak Place and Forest Street. This slide shows an aerial view of the study area courtesy of Google Maps. You can see circled in red the Walnut Street train station, which is a commuting node providing rail access to New York Penn Station, Hoboken, and Montclair State University, among other destinations. Along the west side of property 1 is a tributary of the Second River, also known as Tony's Brook. Surrounding properties include neighborhood commercial uses on Label Street and Walnut Street, and detached 1 and 2 family dwellings on Forest Street and Oak Place. Property 1 is in the C2 General Commercial and Light Manufacturing Zone. Allowed uses in this zone include warehousing, wholesale distribution, light manufacturing, automobile-related uses, retail stores, personal service uses, office uses, and residential uses. Bulk requirements allow for 35 feet and 3 stories for maximum height of commercial buildings and 42 feet, 3 stories for residential buildings with a maximum density of 28 dwelling units per acre. Property 2 is in the R2 two-family residential zone. Allowed uses in this zone include 1 and 2 family detached dwellings, and bulk requirements allow for a maximum of 2.5 stories and 35 feet in height and require a minimum lot width of 60 feet. The Unified Land Use and Circulation Plan for the township recommends that property 1 be located in the C5 transitional area, which is shown in yellow on this map. Uses are encouraged to be weighted toward residential while allowing for limited office and small-scale retail uses in this district. Bulk requirements would allow for a maximum height of 3 stories and 35 feet, 65% lot coverage, and 28 dwelling units per acre. And the
Excuse
plan
me, Tommy, can you
Yes.
tell me how tall is the Richie Cesar building?
Height-wise, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's 2 stories.
Yeah, but it's big. You don't know. Okay, thank you.
And no changes were recommended in the plan for parcel 2, property 2. The study report contained a fairly detailed history of the subject area, highlights of which I've included on this slide. This is not the full history. So I'm going to just quickly go through this. And please note that a lot of the earlier history in this timeline pertains to property 1, but property 2 is discussed later in the timeline as well. In 1869, Samuel Crump relocated his printing business from New York City to the location of property 1 in the study area. In 1877, the factories that were constructed on site for the printing business burnt down and were subsequently replaced with new buildings. Between 1890 and 1910, the property changed hands several times, ending up with the New Jersey Coated Paper Company, as pictured here from the Montclair Times in 1926. In 1928, the New Jersey Coated Paper Company ceased operations on site. The township acquired the property in 1929 and demolished several of the buildings on site, aside from portions of 2 to 10 Erie Street, which is the converted industrial building that remained today. The Montclair Welfare Bureau moved in 1930 and operated here until 1963. In 1937, a motor vehicle inspection station was constructed on site. In 1979, property 1 was acquired by the Rombo family. In 1985, property 1 was purchased by the current owner of the property, 34 Label Street Associates. Later that same year, property 1 was deemed an area in need of rehabilitation. A redevelopment plan was prepared, adopted, and carried out for the site improvements, which included paving, fencing, landscaping, and interior work in the building. This was funded in part by the Essex County Improvement Authority. In 1994, the state of New Jersey acquired property 2, which is the 4th Street property, and demolished an existing structure on the site to make infrastructure improvements associated with Tony's Brook, which I'll discuss more later in the presentation as well. In 1998, property 2 was purchased by 34 Label Street Associates, the current owner of both properties in the study area. In 2000, the Board of Adjustment approved a site plan and use variance for property 2 to provide off-street parking. The approved site plan includes 10 diagonal parking spaces with wheel stops, a stockade fence, and vehicular access from Forest Street. The current use of this property, which we'll discuss later, is not fully consistent with this approval. In 2002, a restaurant opened at 2 Erie Street after the building was ground leased to the restaurant owner. And then finally, in 2015, 34 Label Street Associates reacquired the building at 2 Erie Street after a denied subdivision application and subsequent abandonment of the restaurant.
So did the restaurant operate from 2002 to 2015?
That's correct.
So it was a viable restaurant for at least 13 years.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I believe it only operated until 2012.
All right. So 10 years it was operated as a restaurant with no problems.
We'll say it's operated as a restaurant. We don't know if there were problems or not.
No, I'm just making the point that in the study, you know, there's lots of discussion about how it's problematic use as a restaurant, but yet for 10 years it was operated as a restaurant.
That's fine. We'll say it operated as a restaurant.
Okay, so now I'm going to go through property 1 and discuss our evaluation that's contained in the study report. So property 1 contains 3 structures. Structure 1 is the converted 2-story industrial building, which comprises 4 through 10 Erie Street, as well as 7 Oak Place. Structure 2 is the vacant 2-story restaurant building at 2 Erie Street, which occupies the corner of Label Street and Erie Street. And structure 3 is a small detached 1-story storage building associated with the restaurant building, which you can see indicated on this slide. This property contains 81 surface parking spaces in 2 areas, one access from Erie Street and one access from Oak Place, which are connected along the west side of the site. The photos on the right side of this slide show the narrow and uneven sidewalk along Erie Street in front of structure 2, including utility and signage obstacles and tripping hazards. Oops, sorry, one more point here. In the top photo, you can also see the main entrance to the restaurant building is located at the northeast corner of the structure rather than at the southeast corner, which is the prominent corner there on Erie and Label Street. There's a private roadway along property 1 on Erie Street of unknown ownership, which has complicated the use of the property. This is a screenshot that was taken from the planning board report that was presented in 2014 as part of the subdivision request that was denied.
Can I just ask the question? How is it that the ownership is unknown? When I read this, I was very confused by that.
Well, the tax records don't indicate an owner for this property, and we don't have any records that indicate who the owner is currently. It's not township property, and the tax records just don't have any information.
Are the taxes being paid?
No, this is the sidewalk and the right of way. So nobody's paying taxes.
There's no tax obligation.
Right. There's no building on this. It's really what's in this is the right.
It's a right of way.
Right.
Gotcha.
So
the sidewalk along to Erie Street and then a portion of Erie Street itself.
So if it's not privately owned, isn't it by default owned by the town?
It is privately owned, but there's no record of who owns it.
You say it's privately owned, but we don't know who owns it.
Well, I think it's the converse. We know the town doesn't own it. So since the town doesn't own it, it has to be privately owned.
How far back was a title search done? Were county records investigated? I know the township may not have it, but was a title search performed?
No.
And how about New Jersey Transit? Do they own it?
No, I don't, because it's not directly adjacent to their property.
Okay.
You can see that the portion of the property that the township owns, we own the street that's to the east. You can see on this map. It's this piece. And there's that we don't have any record of who owns it.
Are we going to search the county records?
Excuse me?
Are there plans to search the county records?
We didn't search the county records, we just searched the township records.
I think we'd have to figure out who owned it if we were going to go forward with the plan.
With the
But clearly that in-depth investigation beyond what was the low-hanging fruit hasn't been done yet.
Right. And it's one of the criteria. If there's, if the owner, one of the criteria for redevelopment is ownership, problems with ownership, and there clearly is an issue with the ownership of this particular piece of property that's associated with this parcel.
Not if all the records haven't been searched. We don't really know that.
Right. Agreed.
Okay. Well, and from my perspective, it's a problem, and that's why we think it meets this part of that property meets that particular criteria. Anyway, go ahead, Tommy.
Okay. As I mentioned, the western side of property 1 borders Tony's Brook. Along this side of the property, there's a vehicular access point to the garage spaces on the west side of the building, as well as the connection between the Oak Place parking area and the Erie Street parking area. However, the layout of the building creates a fairly narrow pinch point that causes maneuverability issues. In addition, as can be seen in the top right photo of this slide, there is evident erosion along Tony's Brook immediately adjacent to this laneway into several of the parking spaces on site.
What is the pinch point dimensions that you keep mentioning?
I don't have that figure offhand.
Because, I mean, I think we look at a 24-foot wide allows 2 vehicles to go through in other applications we've looked at. So I don't understand, how can you say it's a pinch point when you don't know what the dimensions are, just by looking at it?
We
And
did
walking
look
the
at it.
site and
Carmel, we have the site plan, and you can come, if you want more information, we'll pull up that section of the site plan and show where the garages are and the parking is and the access. And we were there, and there is a pinch point here, because when cars are parking into those garages, the other cars can't get through. So
What part of the building is this again, Janice? Because I saw the parking lot was fairly easy to navigate, so.
it's the part that's over, it's right, it's
The rear?
East Brook.
Oh, where we don't know who the ownership is?
No,
no,
it's the other
right
side.
here.
Oh, the other side.
Can you
The
see
other
my
side.
cursor
Okay.
by chance?
There's garages there, and they pull into the garages, and cars unload there, and then other cars can't get around and navigate around that portion of the building. That's the pinch point.
But they can get in and
It's
out.
still the road, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
still
road on both sides.
both sides.
They just can't get through at that point. That's what we're saying. We watched it. When we were there, they could not get through because there was somebody who was unloading, because he has one of those businesses right there with a carpentry business. And the cars that tried to get to the other side of the parking lot couldn't get through. They had to go all the way around. That's what we call it's a pinch point.
Able to move on.
Go ahead.
Let's see. And also in these photos, there's a demonstrated lack of pedestrian access on the site to the various entrances on the west side of the building. There's really no pedestrian infrastructure. It's all vehicular based. So in this slide, the left photo shows an example of outdated and unmaintained storm water management systems on property 1. The right photo shows one of a series of observation wells that are located throughout the site to monitor for ongoing remediation of trichlor.
You can see how there's no way that the leaders are crushed going into the inlet right there. So there's some issues, some maintenance issues with the stormwater.
It strikes me that you could take the downspout and you could run it underneath the window, so it's not, I don't know, sorry.
Carmel, these are just our observations, and you can
Right.
take them all in totality. And obviously there's monitoring wells on the site because there are contamination issues. The other picture's the monitoring well.
Right. So
it's
these monitoring wells are located throughout the site. It's for ongoing remediation of trichloroethylene or TCE groundwater contamination, which was caused by the previous industrial uses that were on the site over the years.
So that will continue. There'll be continuing environmental issues at this site.
Well, hopefully they'll clean it up.
Well, any
They're in the
idea?
process of remediating, but they have these wells to monitor the process to make sure that it's going in the right direction. These photos show the interior office spaces at 6 and 10 Erie Street and Structure 1, which demonstrates a lack of access to natural light and air in many parts of the building due to its depth and the piecemeal interior renovations and divisions for the various tenants that were performed over the years.
Tommy, do we know how many, or if there's any way to quantify what percentage of these office spaces don't have access to light or not? Or, I mean, is the majority of it like the photo on the right or the photo on the left?
So the photo on the left is 6 Erie Street. So this is fairly typical where the office space spans the entire width of the building.
And there's
the windows are only
in the front and
located
the back,
on
is that?
the far extreme, correct, the front and the back for all intents and purposes, and then everything in the middle doesn't have access to windows.
And yet these spaces are rented. There's current tenants.
Yes.
And then Tommy, do we have a sense of how many of the spaces are similar? The one on the right is a school, right? A foreign language school, is that correct?
That's correct. It's a tutoring,
Tutoring.
public school, nonprofit tutoring.
How
That's-
many of their classrooms is that typical of their classrooms, or do they have more classrooms that have?
Let me explain that. That's the Montclair Fund for Educational Excellence Space. They are there rent-free. So the owner who gave us the tour of the building said MFEE was looking for space. He's with no rent. So he had this extra space. He said, "Here, you can use it." He said
Yeah.
it was rent-free, and they use it, I guess, for some of their after-school programs.
So, but is that typical of the spaces in there, or are there more classrooms that have window access, or
There are
what would you
some-
say, how many of the
there are some-
classrooms are like this with no windows versus those that have window access?
I'd say probably at least more than half of the space doesn't have access to a window.
And how many rooms approximately, Tommy?
I could guess 6, maybe.
6 rooms?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to look at the floor plan.
No, I appreciate the estimate. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. So the photos on this slide show the interior of the second floor of structure 1. So this is the second floor of the converted industrial building. This is actually accessed from 7 Oak Place. So the northwestern portion of the site is how you access the second story. Some of the office spaces like this one have integrated glass partitions in order to allow light to get to the deeper interior spaces. Because again, the width of the space isn't conducive to window access in all of the interior spaces. The emergency egress for the second floor tenants is through a fold down wall hatch in the main corridor that leads to the roof of the building, and then to a folding fire escape that provides access to Oak Place.
And that's fully conforming with fire safety laws?
I would assume so, yes. All right, moving on to structure 2. The left photo shows the exterior of the restaurant building at 2 Erie Street, and the right photo shows the abandoned interior space on the first floor. Structure 2, based on our observations, has an odd interior layout, which includes separate kitchen spaces on each of the 3 floors, which includes a basement. There's a lack of space for seating because of the layout of the restaurant. In the basement, there are many windowless dining rooms and kind of a serpentine floor plan. Plans on file in the planning office showing the approved interior layout are actually quite different from what was actually constructed and what we saw on site.
Is the word abandoned the right word? I mean, it's not abandoned, it's owned, it's just not used.
The restaurant business was abandoned.
Utilities are
34 Label Street, they've taken over ownership of the property, and they have like the HVAC system going to prevent deterioration happening on the inside. It's not being used, and a lot of the kitchen equipment and the dining furniture has been left behind.
I know, Janice, I had asked you about this property several times over the years, and what you had told me is that it could not be sold because there was this environmental issue going on. Is that?
Carmel, I don't know if I said that. I said, I don't know, because properties with environmental issues are sold all the time. But I do know that they've been remediating this site for many, many years. When you say this property, are you talking about the restaurant or the
Restaurant? Yeah, just in my view, the restaurant, yes, it looks like the restaurant has been unused, even abandoned, if you want to use that term. And I had asked you over the years what's going on with the property, and you would say, well, it's being subject to environmental
Well, it is, 'cause it's part of-
and so therefore nothing could be done with it.
I don't know. No, that's as far as I know. We've heard nothing about this property other than the reports that I get that because this property is part of the larger property with the former industrial building. So this is part of the same property. I get reports that the entire property is under remediation, but that's it. I don't have any information on anybody who was looking to put a restaurant in here. They haven't approached my office for that. I can't answer you why a restaurant has not located in here in the past 10 years. I don't know.
That really wasn't my question.
Well, then what's your question? If you can
No,
repeat.
I'm just saying, I asked you over the years, what's going on with the Richie Cesar building? And you said nothing can be done with it because it's under remediation.
Well, I don't think that that's correct. I think it's under remediation, as is the rest of the property, and would have to be, that was not why it closed. So if that was what you took from my response, I don't believe that's what I said, but that's
Well,
correct.
maybe it was a situation where nobody wanted to put a restaurant that was undergoing environmental remediation. Doesn't exactly sound like an attractive place to establish a new restaurant.
I do know that there was litigation too, so, that litigation creates these vacancy issues as well.
So is the litigation done?
I believe so, yes. The litigation's over. The property is now owned by the building is now owned by 34 Label Street Associates, who owns the rest of the property.
That litigation is long done.
Okay.
Right. I also believe there was a liquor license attached to that restaurant, which has been sold.
Right.
And I think in order for it to have been sold, I would assume, Mr. Ness, that all litigation or whatever was attached to it had to all be rectified.
I would agree with you on that, Robin. The point is that the litigation, I couldn't even find the case today. It's been archived.
Okay. Right. Also, as far as abandonment, if you look through the very heavily soiled windows of that building, you could still see the tables are set. There's still water glasses and silverware on the tables. It's pretty eerie and scary to look in there.
Like Mrs. Hatchet's
Erie
house.
on Erie
Yes.
Street.
Yes, Carmel.
You mean it was Cesare to look in there? Is that what you mean?
Oh, no, eerie.
It's actually quite amazing, really. to look
It
at.
is amazing. Yep.
Like people
it
just
is
put
amazing.
down their glasses and ran.
Yes, it's true. It's true. Okay. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna proceed here. So after all of that, so our study in the report concludes that property one has been found to meet criteria A, D, E, and H for an area in need of redevelopment. Criterion A, as I said earlier, I'm going to go through these in a little bit more depth. So the actual full language for criterion A reads, the generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any such characteristics or are lacking in light, air, or space as to be conducive to unwholesome living for working conditions. And so our finding is that structure one on property one lacks access to light and air, as we said, in its interior spaces, which is a result of the conversion of the space from an industrial use to a commercial use, as well as the various additions and partitioning of the deep interior spaces.
Can I
Structure
ask you
two is generally
a question,
obsolescent.
a question to do with this. Yet, how many leases do you have on, how many properties are vacant? Yet all of these buildings are being rented. So I don't get how this criterion is met if you have all these rented spaces.
So we're presenting this is basically our conclusion. You can
Okay.
agree or disagree.
I disagree.
Yeah, so let us get through the.
But I had a question about how many available spaces are there and how many are rented?
We can get back to you with that. We'd have to talk to the property owner to get an exact figure for you. But we can get back to you with that.
But you're drawing your conclusion not knowing that information.
Our conclusion isn't about the tenancy of the space. It's about its lack of access to light and air. So, all right, I'm going to continue. Structure two we believe is generally obsolescent in its design with unsanitary and substandard interior conditions. This is illustrated in its strange layout that I discussed and the strange interior flow of the space, as well as the space having not been able to be rented by ownership to restaurateurs in the past. Criterion D in full reads, areas with buildings or improvements which by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design, lack of ventilation, light and sanitary facilities, excessive land coverage, deleterious land use or obsolete layout, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safe, health, morals, or welfare of the community. As discussed, the vehicular pinch point in immediate vicinity to the eroding bank of Tony's Brook creates an obsolescent site and site layout. In addition, the lot is nearly fully impervious, if not fully impervious, which is a detriment to Tony's Brook, especially in such close proximity to the waterway. As can be seen in the photos on the right, there are inadequate pedestrian facilities along a portion of Erie Street and no pedestrian facilities whatsoever for a majority of Erie Street and along all of Oak Place, bordering the subject property. Lastly, there's insufficient on-site parking as evidenced by the overflow parking of vehicles related to the commercial uses on property 1, located on property 2, which I'll discuss in the next part of my presentation when I go through property 2.
Tommy, can you go back to that previous slide?
Sure.
I think if you look at that at figure 18, when you can see that there are these loading bays. And can you see those loading? Yes. So what happens is when cars pull up to those loading bays, nobody else can get by. And when we say that's where the pinch point is, I don't have the exact dimensions, but what we saw when we visited were that cars had pulled up to there and then they couldn't get around. You had to go all the way around the building. And that's why we classified that as a pinch point.
Janet, what uses are in there? Is that a frequent issue? Like, are there people coming in and out all the time, dropping things off, or is that like?
No, they're like carpenters and contractors.
Oh, that's where the storage stuff is. They're storing all their stuff in there.
Yeah, they're storing, and there's workshops too.
Yeah.
Carpenter does work inside there.
And then my other question, the other side of the street where the pinch point comes into play, is there any way to expand the road slightly?
This is Tony's Brook right here.
That's Tony Brook right there. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
So criterion E reads, a growing lack or total lack of proper utilization of areas caused by the condition of the title, diverse ownership of the real properties therein, or other similar conditions which impede land assemblage or discourage the undertaking of improvements, resulting in a stagnant and unproductive condition of land potentially useful and valuable for contributing to and serving the public health, safety, and welfare, which condition is presumed to be having a negative social or economic impact or otherwise being detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the surrounding area or the community in general. The condition of the unknown ownership, the private roadway along Erie Street, in our view, complicates any potential future development along Erie Street frontage that would lead to meaningful pedestrian improvements in this right-of-way. In addition, the abandonment and ownership transfer of 2 Erie Street from the previous owner to the current owner, as well as the litigation that took place, and the lack of intervening interior maintenance, as well as unapproved interior layout changes, have limited the viability of the reuse of this structure for potential future tenants.
Just to be clear, the ownership isn't diverse. It's all owned by the same people, except for the unknown little strip that we don't really know what's going on yet because we've only checked the township records. Is that an accurate recitation?
That's correct.
And there's no requirement for that building to be a restaurant. It could be any other kind of use as well.
That's true.
Yes, that fits in with the zoning for that lot. Yes. So criterion H, the designation of the delineated area is consistent with smart growth planning principles adopted pursuant to law or regulation. So the study report outlines various policy objectives of the New Jersey State Plan related to smart growth in PA1 or metropolitan planning areas, which are shown in burgundy on this map, which is taken from the state plan and which includes most of Essex County, including Montclair. These policy objectives include promoting redevelopment, creating new housing, transit-oriented development, and reclamation of environmentally damaged sites. The plan also contains provisions related to transit village redevelopment, which is conversion of underutilized areas near transit stations into walkable mixed-use development. So property one, we believe, provides an opportunity for compact walkable mixed-use development simply because it is in close proximity to the Walnut Street train station. Okay, so now we're going to shift focus to property two. This portion of the presentation will be quite a bit shorter. This is, again, property two is block 3304, lot 1, also known as 121 Forest Street. As approved in 2000, this lot is used for off-street parking, although the manner in which the lot is developed and used is inconsistent with the approved site plan and the Board of Adjustment resolution for the use variance. While off-street parking is indeed the principal use of the site, as can be observed today, parking spaces are not demarcated, there are no wheel stops as described and shown in the plans, and the fencing that is provided is in disrepair and is inconsistent across the edges of the property. There is an easement on the property accounting for the culverted portion of Tony's Brook, which runs beneath Forest Street, property two here, and Oak Place before daylighting along the western edge of property one. This diagram shows here.
So in a
These
sense,
photos show-
that's the only use that you could, could be made of this corner site as a parking lot? You can't build on it because of Tony's Brook?
There are definitely building restrictions because of the easement, correct? You can't build a structure on top of the easement.
So parking is actually a good use of this space. In a,
You know, that's not part of the conclusions that we're drawing, but it is the current use of the space.
Yeah, it is in a residential zone adjoining residential homes. So I think from our perspective, it could be better designed and better utilized to have a positive impact on the adjoining residences. I don't think it currently does in its current iteration.
And then in the photo on the right on this slide, you can see kind of an interesting illustration of where Tony's Brook runs, because you can see in the roadway the pavement is different over the culvert. Just to point that out. As outlined in our report.
Tommy, one thing, the parking on this property, on lot, that's overflow parking from property one.
Mhm.
Even though that's not referenced.
Yeah.
in the-
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's that even though it was not referenced in the use variance that was granted, in actuality, that parking on that lot is limited to tenants on property one.
and
Right,
how many
I'm sorry,
spaces are there?
I didn't discuss
It's a
that.
gravel lot.
But how many spaces are there?
It's
How many
not
cars does it
demarcated,
fit?
so there was no real way to know. There's also a lot of double parking happening on the site.
Doesn't the resolution reference
Here.
10 parking spaces? I
It was
think-
approved with 10 parking spaces, correct, that are diagonal parking spaces. And the resolution, states that the lot had to be developed in accordance with the site plan, which shows the lane markings, the wheel stops, the fences. None of that is really there currently. And so the cars are parked very close together. They're double parked. Portions of the vehicles are blocking the sidewalk because of the double parking. And some of the tenants, the commercial tenants, many of the commercial tenants are using this space as overflow parking and not utilizing the parking that is located on property one. Okay, so the evaluation, our report found that property two has been found to meet criteria E and H for an area in need of redevelopment. I'm not going to go through the full language of these again, but criterion E is paraphrased here: stagnant or unproductive area. We found that this open air parking lot, like Carmel mentioned, is precluded from meaningful development because of the easement running through the site. And as described, there's no screening of the parking, there's no marking, the pavement is not consistent, and there's no delineated curb cut along Oak Place, which we believe creates an unsafe, unorganized, and unsightly condition in a chiefly residential area.
But there is a curb cut, because I just walked by there today. There's a curb cut.
Correct. The curb cut runs about half of the property along Oak Place. So it's really, I don't know if it's half of the linear length of the lot is a curb cut. So it's not really a controlled access point is the point that we've made in the report.
I'm sorry, I don't
Criterion
get that.
H.
I don't get that. So there's a curb cut that runs pretty much the length of the parking area, so people can just pull in and park. What's the problem with that?
Because the site plan.
Because it's a sidewalk.
The site plan, it's a sidewalk. The site plan had a curb cut driveway entrance. The rest of it was a raised curb to protect the sidewalk. And the plan showed a diagonal parking pattern so cars could pull in and park, and then actually they were supposed to exit on Forest Street. And that way you don't have all the cars crossing the sidewalk the way you do in its current layout. That's not what was approved.
And how long ago was that approved?
22 years ago.
22 years ago?
2000. Yep.
2000, yeah.
So it's been operating as this parking lot for 22 years without the improvements that you say it should have had.
Well, I don't know how it was designed or how it was operating, 10 years ago. All I know is what its condition is today.
Okay.
Sounds like a safety issue.
Yes.
Okay, so then criterion H for property 2, again, supports the smart growth statute, similar to our evaluation for property 1. Property 2 is in close proximity to the Walnut Street station, which could make it a good candidate for some type of transit-oriented development or relation to transit-oriented development. So kind of reached the end of the presentation. So this slide summarizes the applicable review criteria for areas in need of redevelopment that are covered in the evaluation here. And so to recap, criteria A and B, we believe apply to property 1, and criteria E and H, we believe apply to both property 1 and property 2, which again, you can see on the slide. Again, this slide is kind of a repeat from the beginning. It shows the next steps in the redevelopment process, which we discussed again at the beginning of the presentation. So I'm not going to repeat myself here, but I'll leave it up for a second for reference. That concludes my presentation on this area in need of redevelopment study, and we'll take questions from the board now. Thank you.
I assume the question I tried to ask a minute ago got cut off because I got disconnected. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, if you asked the question, I didn't hear. Sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't hear it either.
Yeah, so criterion H.
Can
We've
you put
got
those
6
up, Tommy, the
train
criterion?
Yes, criterion H is the smart development, smart growth statute, so that the transit villages stuff. We've got 6 train stations in town. If we could use section H, just kind of willy-nilly, then what property in town would not qualify as smart development given all the train stations we have?
Well, I think generally, when you talk about smart growth and transit village, you talk within walking distance. We start off with a quarter mile. And obviously, I think the walkability decreases the farther you away from a train station. In this instance, these properties, at least property 1, is basically immediately adjacent to a train station. So it just elevates its importance because of its direct proximity to a train station. I think that all of our communities are important, and all of them are walkable, but we don't have development opportunities or redevelopment opportunities at all of our train stations like we do with this one.
And this is going to be a stupid newbie question, which I'm still eligible to ask for at least a little while longer.
We got like another month, Jeff.
Until we
one more
meet in
month.
person, yeah.
Yeah.
Since this is also my first of these things coming in from the council, is it normal for the planner to make recommendations like this? I mean, this is not just a study. This is conclusions that you've drawn that we're either agreeing or disagreeing with, as opposed to some facts that you went out and presented to us for us to make a determination. Is this the way it normally runs, or is this a little unusual?
No, this is the way it normally runs. I'm a licensed professional planner in New Jersey. New Jersey is the only state in the nation that licenses planners. And essentially, licensed planners are required to do these reports. So we do the reports, we do the analysis, and we draw our own conclusions. Clearly, the way the statute's set up, you can either agree or disagree. We're presenting our interpretation of the facts and our conclusions based on the facts. But you are all.
Yeah, Jeff, we look at Janice's report as kind of like an expert report because she is a planner. But just like any expert's report, we as a board can use our own judgment to consider her report as just one fact and just one piece of what we're viewing. So it doesn't, her opinion doesn't become authoritative, and her opinion doesn't become something that we have to necessarily agree with. But I always interpret it more from the standpoint, I'm presenting these facts to you, and here's how I think these facts fit into the statutory criteria that comes in, which is something that she has to do, because if she's looking at the properties and the properties don't meet any of these criteria, then she should be coming back to us and telling us that, that there's no way that they could, fit into these categories. So.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. I guess what I'm reacting to a little bit of this is that normally, and the statute would call, as Carmel mentioned earlier, normally we would have requested the study. And this time it's kind of, we didn't, and it's being presented to us after the fact. But that's what I was.
Well, it is kind of, it's almost like an automatic request. The piece that Carmel raised earlier about it's not the planning board's study. The planning board is the, if you will, the expert arm with respect to planning that the township uses and that the council uses to make certain opinions, to make certain evaluations and to render certain opinions so that they can take formal action. And when it's sent to the planning board, it's not sent to the town planner, the request for this study. It's sent to the planning board, and the planning board's way of addressing that is having the town planner go ahead and create the report. Then we have a hearing and a review like this to determine whether or not we think that the report is adequate, whether or not we agree with conclusions that the town planner has made, whether we think that some other things might be done, and then ultimately to render an opinion back to the township. So, I mean, it's the most efficient way that this is done. So it really is, at the end of the day, it becomes the planning board's report. It's just that the town planner, as our secretary, is the one who puts it together for us, because we don't have a report writer sitting here, nor do we have the resources to do that.
Understood. Thank you.
If I could ask, actually, Janice, what determines whether or not your department would refer this out to an outside planner versus doing it in-house?
Well, generally my capacity to do the work. So for instance, this was 2 properties, and once Tommy came on board, we had the capacity to actually do the work and go out there and do the study. The last time we did a redevelopment study were multiple properties along Bloomfield Avenue. And I think that was prior to, I don't think Graham was here at that point. So it was just me, and I didn't have the capacity to do it, although I have written many of these studies. I've testified in court successfully on my studies in my previous work as a consultant. But yeah, if we don't have the capacity to do it, and I have the funds, then I bring in a consultant to do the work, which I've done in the past as well.
Just one more question. Sorry, John, one more question.
It's not just one more question, it's as many questions as you want to ask.
Okay. Oh my God, I forgot what it was. So when we do these redevelopment studies, do we normally look at the inside space? or is it just the outside?
In my opinion, you have to look at the inside space because obsolescence is one of the criteria. And how else can you determine obsolescence unless you're looking inside as to how the space is arranged and utilized?
All the other reports that I've seen have included inside, where access has been available. The only time that it hasn't been included in what we've received is when they haven't been able to get access to it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking about Lackawanna. We looked inside because it was a historic building, not necessarily, if it wasn't, we weren't looking at the path mark, we were looking at the historic features of it.
Right, but that wasn't
looking at the statute. I feel like they've got to look inside. I think that's got to be right. By the way, I just because we do have 26 participants, Mr. Chairman, I would just as soon let the public have its say because we're going to have a chance to discuss this later.
Well, shouldn't we? I mean, are there more questions on the study right now? Like, I just wanted to clarify a couple things also.
One way or the other, the public's not going to go anywhere until we're finished asking for questions. So, and figure out exactly what we're going to do this evening. So, normally speaking, we kind of let the board exhaust their questions before we shift to the public.
I have one question. Criteria H, the designation of the delineated area is consistent with smart growth planning principles adopted pursuant to law. So I apologize about having, you having to explain again. So I think this criterion H shows this big red area. So does that mean that every piece of land automatically in that big red area immediately qualifies for an area for redevelopment? And I'm saying that because I think that the law says that any of each of the conditions A through H, any one of them. So by conclusion, and what you're presenting here seems to be, just help me out here. I'm just trying to think, is this whole area of New Jersey automatically in the, potentially in the redevelopment area? Is that a walk in the park or what?
I think.
Or do we need to dig in further in terms of?
Exactly. If you let me respond, I think you have to dig in further because on its surface, yes. But what you have to do is you start off with the red areas, which is the metropolitan planning areas and the centers that are identified on the state plan. But then you have to dig in because within that red area, not everything is served by mass transit. Some of it might be have different levels of
access.
Of access, right, and environmental conditions within that red area. You have certain areas. You have wetlands.
Okay.
Areas that are environmentally sensitive. So you take that at the surface and you have to delve deeper. And I think that's what we did in this report.
And I apologize for not being able to refer to it directly, but is there a paragraph or two which explains why it meets H?
Yes.
In the study.
That is in the evaluation section for property 1 and property 2. There's a section that has the language of criterion H, and then it has our interpretation of how it applies.
Oh, page 36.
Yeah, but Tony, my problem with it is that they're using the transit village issue, and I think that it's not a great way to think about it because of how many transits we have here.
Yeah.
And frankly, isn't that a factor? I mean, do we have to? I mean, it's not determinative, right? It fits within the transit village. We're not required to pass a,
Right.
area in need of redevelopment. It's just one factor.
Yeah, I guess my question is,
Yes.
when I read the law itself, it says a delineator may be determined to be an area may be determined to be in need of redevelopment if any one of the following conditions is found.
And the key term in what that sentence was may.
May, yeah.
So again, that's where I think you have to dig deeper into the qualities of each particular property.
Ah, okay. So may is key. It's not automatic. You might. So okay.
You have to look at you.
So it's
You
all
always have to
rather
look at the
gray.
big picture.
Yeah. So it's not black and white here. This is lots of gray here.
Look, I'll
Certainly,
ask
room for interpretations. Yes.
Yep. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and ask what may be the dumb question, but it also may be the elephant in the room. So, these properties are commonly owned. There's already 3-story zoning that's pretty permissive. What's stopping them if they want to develop from developing?
Exactly my question.
Why does this need to be a thing?
Exactly.
You know why.
John, I really don't. I'm asking this honestly and straightforwardly. Why? I mean, I know they want more bulk.
More importantly, they want the financial incentives that allow them to,
They wanted
that
to
go along with this, that will allow them to maximize their development.
So there's a benefit to us being involved in this as a planning board, right? You see the Seymour Street project, I think, is an example of a positive outcome based on a planning board that I wasn't a part of, and Jeff wasn't a part.
And also, just can I piggyback on what you just said, Mike?
Yeah.
If we designate this an area for redevelopment, we get to set the terms and the parameters of the development. If he develops it without that, then he's he can go within the confines of what's already established. But as long as he met those confines, we'd have no say in it. So they could put some really ugly boxes on that property, and it would be fine, because it would meet all the zoning criteria,
But there would be the HPC protection at the same time. It would have to go because these buildings are in a proposed historic district. Frankly, the factories is an interesting building. The Cedar building is an interesting building. So there would be that level of protection as well. And there is also, of course, a financial detriment to the town if we go with this route as well. So it's a balancing act.
All of these things we have to consider.
Right.
It's also parking. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of parking spaces. So how big could he go if he sticks to the zoning as it is now?
That's true too. And he would have to go, it could only go 3 stories. And the parking issue as well also would protect some of the development.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anybody else? Comments and questions before we open it up to the public?
John, can we take a short break before we open it up to the public?
Thank you, Carmel. I'm glad you asked.
I'm not evil. I'm not evil.
You're not at all. Not at all. You're clairvoyant, in fact.
A witch. Okay.
Oh boy. All right. So we will take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back and we'll open up to the public and hear what the public has to say.
Good.
Okay. Alexa,
Rick, are you ready? Okay.
Okay, everyone. All right, so at this time, we're going to open up the forum for public comment and question. Janice will unmute people, and we'll try and take everybody in as orderly a fashion as we possibly can.
John, I think I'll go one by one because we have so many participants. I don't want to do it all at one time.
I will leave the execution in your capable hands.
Okay. So I'm going to start at the first one on my list, which is Alan Trembulac. Alan, I am trying to, okay, let me say, if anybody wants to, there we go. Alan, I've unmuted you. So if
Okay.
you want, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Good evening, everyone. This is Alan Trembulac. I am the attorney for the owner of this property, 34 Label Street, 34 Label Street Associates, the principal of which is Howard Silver, a longtime Montclair resident who now lives in California. I've been involved with this property for many years. I represent the seller of the property, who's entered into a contract with a prospective purchaser. I do not represent the purchaser. However, I have been closely involved with them and assisting them as going through this process, and I'm familiar with what's been contemplated and what hasn't been contemplated. The first thing I want to address, which was the first thing this board discussed tonight, which was this rendering that was posted by someone on social media suggesting that this is what we intend to do with this property. That is absolutely false. It's fiction. It's part of a propaganda campaign designed to influence you and scare people and scare the community that if this limited process tonight is approved by the planning board, the designation process, that this is what's going to happen to this property. It is an absolute fiction. I don't know where this rendering came from, who prepared it, or for whom it was prepared. I assure you it was not prepared by the seller. It was not prepared by the contract purchaser. It has nothing to do with what's before you tonight. If I had to guess, and this is purely a guess, there were several other people interested in purchasing this property over the years. None of those transactions went forward. This may have been prepared for someone else. It was not prepared, by the seller. It was not prepared by the contract purchaser. And it is just so outrageous that people seen this and seem to give credibility to it, and wanted to post it front and center at the beginning of this hearing. There was, this is part of a propaganda campaign. Other stuff that I read on social media talking about an 8-story building, talking about taking over and utilizing the municipal parking lot for parking on this property, serious environmental issues. It's all false. It's all fiction. It's concerning that people seem to have given credit to that and were influenced by that, before this hearing even began. This rendering should not be considered at all as part of this hearing. Because first of all, this hearing has nothing to do with how this property is to be redeveloped, if it is to be redeveloped. As has been discussed I think repeatedly, the board's limited role here is sort of as a fact finder and to make a factual determination based upon what's been presented as to whether this property meets the criteria for designation as an area in need of redevelopment. That's all that's before you tonight. We're not talking about whether this property should be redeveloped, how it should be redeveloped. Those are decisions that are made by the council. That's what the law provides. And this board has a limited role in that process. The other, misconceptions, I guess, that I'd like to correct is that this hearing tonight has nothing to do with the municipal parking lot, has nothing to do with Erie Park or any other property other than these two properties. I can assure you that if this property is to be redeveloped, that all of the required parking for the redevelopment project would be on this property and would not rely upon the municipal parking lot or any other property. But the plans for this, no plans have been prepared for this property. We're not anywhere near preparing plans for the property. So for people to show you this rendering and to try to scare everyone, I would hope, I know all of you. I'm obviously, I see you usually once a month. I have great respect for you, and I would expect more, candidly, than people who have formed conclusions based upon what may have been posted on social media. It's fiction. It's not reality. It's all misinformation that's designed to get to a certain result that's not based on facts or reality. Let me see. I just want to mention a couple of things that have been discussed tonight. There is an environmental issue with respect to the property. It's been undergoing remediation for a number of years under the supervision of the DEP. That process is ongoing. It will continue. The property will be cleaned up in accordance with DEP requirements. The other thing I wanted to mention, a comment was made that there would be a financial detriment to the town if the planning board were to recommend that the property be designated. I don't think that's an appropriate comment. And the fact of the matter is, depending on what happens with the property, which is a total unknown at this point, there would likely be financial benefits to the community. And the other thing that Mr. Nguyen, properly pointed out, and again, this sort of gets ahead of ourselves here, which I'm trying not to do, and I'm hoping this board will not do, but the redevelopment process gives the town, a much greater element of control over what happens on this property, because you would ultimately be preparing a redevelopment plan, which would have to be adopted by the council, which would, have really dictate how this property is ultimately developed. And, I don't know how everyone else feels about the Seymour Street redevelopment, but, the planning board, in my mind, did a fabulous job with that project. And look how it's turned out. You've got this wonderful, beautiful plaza, great public space, plenty of parking, more parking than is necessary for the redevelopment project. And that's also because the town had a lot more control over what happened with that property by going through the redevelopment process. But again, the board's legal responsibility here is to make a factual determination based upon what you've heard. And what you've heard tonight is a report prepared by the planning department, a licensed professional planner who has arrived at conclusions. I understand you're not bound to accept them, but there's nothing contrary before you. But you've got to decide this based upon the facts, based upon what your role is, and to not make decisions based upon, fraudulent, false information, misinformation posted on social media with absolutely no basis in fact. The last thing I would say is it appears from what I've read that the person responsible for this misinformation propaganda campaign seems to be Martin Schwartz, a former member of this board, disgruntled member of this board, who seems to have a personal vendetta against the mayor for not reappointing him, against other members of the town council, against Janice Talley. And this is just another opportunity for him to express his grievances, and by spreading misinformation. That's really all I want to say. I appreciate you giving me the time and indulging me, and I would just hope that this board would follow its legal obligations and arrive at a factual determination simply as to whether the property qualifies as an area in need of redevelopment. And I think it clearly does, based upon the report from the planning department and the testimony that's been presented. So thank you very much.
The next person, I believe, is Alicia Robinson Reish. I'm going to unmute you. Alicia, if you can turn on your microphone to allow me to unmute you.
There may be a button that says something like connect audio.
Yeah. I don't see Ms. Robinson. I think we might have to come back to you. Other members of the public, if you unmute your computers. Okay, there we go. Ms. Robinson, you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, hi. Good evening, everyone. I don't really have any specific questions at this time. I would like to say that I am a resident of Oak Place, so I get to look at this, the exterior of this building on a daily basis. And the only other comment I have is regarding the parking lot on the corner of Forest and Oak Place. Not only is it used as an overflow for parking from Label Street, but Mr. Silver actually allows the residents of Oak Place to park there for free, because there are quite a few houses on Oak Place that do not have driveways. And so as a courtesy, as a good neighbor, he does extend that courtesy to us, as well as to some of the people who are on Forest Street.
Okay. Call in user number 10. It's 862368. I've unmuted you. 862368. Okay, there's a unmuted you. 862368.
6612.
Okay, there's a unmuted you.
Yeah.
6612.
6612.
6612. Okay, there's a unmuted you.
Yeah. Okay.
6612. 6612. Okay, there's a unmuted you.
Okay, I'll put this down. Sorry, my first on this, so I'll just try to. Hi, my name is. Can you hear me?
Yes. What is your name?
My name is Ruth Peretti.
Okay, great.
And I'm sorry, I'm also like the first, I'm trying to see if I can hear myself here, but okay, hello?
Yep, we hear you just fine.
All right, thank you. I've been listening to the plan. Thank you. My name is Ruth Peretti. I'm also the owner with my husband of Ruthie's Barbecue and Pizza on the Forest Street in Chestnut. And I want to say thank you to the board and your thoughtful questions, and I see the close attention that's being paid to this important project. I want to point out, the questions for me are bigger than development. The questions for me are speaking to the environment. This is a flood zone, and this area around Tony's Brook that you brought in, and also you brought in the questions of remediation on Richie Cecere Estate. And that project and that property, there's still questions around it about the remediation. We're living through a time right now that is so critical. Montclair, I grew up in this town. I'm very aware of the water tables and the flooding that happens throughout this town. I don't think it's going to decrease. I think it's going to increase. I am questioning how we can approve a redevelopment or how this can, because I don't question the need of a redevelopment of this area because I do see opportunities, but I do question the planning. And I think there's volatility in us approving this right now without knowing, because we're all talking about development and parking spaces and how we can live there without actually addressing the climate and this environment and what's happening around that precious area around Tony's Brook. We're in a crisis here. And without us really thinking hard about how we can, if we're investing in development without investing in our earth and how we will sustain this, I don't think that's forward thinking. I think that's very short-sighted. And again, I'm sorry, I know there are questions around the master plan and the questions about how the DEP will look at this, and I'm sure that will come up later. But I'm afraid that the improvement going through saying this is an area in need of redevelopment, in need of redevelopment for what? For buildings, for parking spaces, or an area of redevelopment for protecting this precious watershed and our land right here and how we're going to survive here in future climate crises. This is very important. I've lived here. I've lived through many floods. I've lived through many experiences of people being flooded out of their businesses, Egan's, Label Street, Tony's Brook going through there. I can't imagine how we can approve this redevelopment question without really questioning the redevelopment as opposed to questioning about the environment itself and how it withstand the further environmental elements of climate change. So that's my big concern right now. And I don't know, are there answers to that? Can someone tell me?
I think from my perspective, those are some very good points that you raised, and those are clearly something that would be addressed in a redevelopment plan.
And I think another thing that you have to understand is that the planning board is a land use board. We can only address land use issues. Certainly, the issues with respect to the impact on Tony's Brook and the impact of what kind of development will go into that area, depending on what sort of land use choices are made, would be something that would be considered when a plan would be developed. But again, our issue this evening, before we can even get to that question, is to determine whether or not this property meets the criteria under the state statutory guidelines as to whether or not it's eligible to be considered.
Yeah, so that's why I bring this up to the board, because I would like the board to seriously question this as you ponder your response. My friend Sharon owns, Egan's. Her foundation has been destroyed on countless occasions with that brook flooding. And I keep on thinking to myself, how can anyone keep on building in this area? How can we actually think how to restore our community by restoring environments that really respect what's happening to our environment? I don't think more development and parking spaces are the responsible response to our environment and to our future. This is not something, I mean, it will burden the tax system, it will burden insurance companies, it will burden a lot. So I just ask that the board think about this as you're considering this as an area for redevelopment.
Right.
Redevelopment for environmental concerns, yes, please think of that. I just asked that.
All right, thank you.
So thank you. Thank you for your attention.
All right, call-in user number 11. I'm unmuting you. Yeah. Number 11?
Do you want to read out the phone number, at least the beginning of the phone number?
973-902. Call-in user 11, you're unmuted.
Yes, hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. What is your name?
Wonderful. Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Petya Morozov, and I'm an architect in Montclair. My office happens to be at 7 Oak Place. I'm one of the businesses that would be affected. I do also remember when we took a visit from Ms. Talley and from your new assistant planner. You know, unfortunately, there was no mention of what the visit was all about, so it would have been great to have a conversation with you then, Ms. Talley. But I get to speak with all of you tonight. I am born and raised in Montclair. I started my business with my partner back in 2003. This is our third location. We are not just an architectural firm, but we also do fabrication of custom light fixtures. We also do design build. You may know some of the projects that we've done in town: local coffee at Watchung Plaza, Amante Vino on Church Street. Those are done as projects using light fabrication facilities. And we're very lucky that we were able to land a space in what is considered a light manufacturing zone, which is B2, which is where we are. What was also a big, huge draw for us, frankly, was how we were actually sold on how entrepreneurial the community at 7 Oak Place is. It's vibrant. It hosts a branding agency, another set of architectural firms, carpenters, you know, huge fitness, very, very successful fitness operation called DFit, a photographer, an environmental engineering firm, several builders, and we are not your typical, you know, retail form of economic development for the town, but I would say that we provide a vital service to not just our own town, but to many other regional places. And I would say that the other thing is that we also happen to employ local people. Our office is made up entirely of people who not just work here at our office, but who live in Montclair. So there's a really close community. I would say, you know, our colleagues and our neighbors are also from the area. You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, when Montclair is, you know, making the news, it's either because of, you know, very large redevelopment projects to bring in more, you know, more tax rateables, I suppose, or for, you know, for restaurants and retail. But the businesses that are not retail don't really get the same kind of attention, and yet office space is of such high demand. And so taking away these vital, very creative entrepreneurial office spaces that really were attracted to how unique it is to be in an 1800s building, is actually part of our brand. We made our choice very carefully. I think, Janice, when you came to visit us, you must have seen how we fitted out the space. We have windows in every single space. I know that there are other callers who are going to be calling in who are also business owners, and they will probably refute the claim that we are in dilapidated spaces. I find that to be actually quite insulting to make that claim and to assume that that's the circumstance for all the other businesses. So I think basically what I want to say to the board is that I don't find this particular study to be very conclusive at all. I think that there's more questions than there are answers. And I would really highly recommend that there's more of a public process in place so that more people in town can understand what the implications are. I think Ruthie did a great job to say that there's more to this than just another development opportunity that the finance committee of this town commissioned, at our expense. I am a tax-paying resident here in Montclair, so I'm very curious as to know why we're having these kinds of expenses added onto our plate when it's already pretty full. There are no vacancies in this building. We were actually asked to move out in advance of our lease. So there's clearly active negotiations happening by a developer. There are intentions for some kind of development to happen here. So there's a lot of momentum happening that isn't being discussed here. And I think that if we're going to be forthright about all of the information, let's see what the development plans are. If this is not actually the development that was intended, because working with developers, they do want to see what kinds of maximizations they can have on a piece of property. So there must be some kind of development happening here, even if it's in draft form. And I think that would be also important to have and to bring onto the into this study. So I really do hope that this planning board continues to ask all the great questions. I really do appreciate those who are stepping up and asking the hard questions. I think that it has illuminated it for many other people who are, frankly, find this process very obscure. So thank you all for your time.
Right, thank you. I would ask that the people who would like to be heard be considerate of the other people who also want to be heard. And if we could try and get to your points as quickly as possible so that everybody has a fair chance to be heard as the night goes on, I think it would be beneficial. I don't want to limit anybody's time to talk, but if if we're going to take at least 10 minutes or more, per person, and if all of you want to talk, we're really going to be hard pressed to hear everybody. And when I say hear everybody, I mean to really give everybody our full attention. So please bear that in mind.
All right, call-in user 14-973-330. I've unmuted you, so if you turn on your microphone.
Good evening. My name is Frank Wabaki. Am I coming through clearly?
Yes.
Okay. I will take the chair's advice and be as brief as I can. I think the study is insufficient and there's some more work that needs to be done. And clearly some of the information here is misleading in numerous ways. and I can enumerate on them, but I don't think I want to take up everybody's time by pointing out all the issues. I will highlight a couple of things. I do think that any recommendation going forward should eliminate the transit village references, because the transit village, by definition, is a mile in diameter. And I think the people on Midland Avenue and Christopher Street don't realize that they would be part of the recommendation here. I'm confused by the buyer's attorney or the developer's attorney saying there was no serious environmental issues. Yet the study says there are, and then he came back and said, yes, there are ongoing environmental issues. So he needs to pick a lane. As far as what the planning board role is, I think you can school the attorney on what your role is, but I think it goes beyond just collecting facts. I think the biggest issue for me is what's been raised before about Erie Street and who owns it, and is it a street? And I think that's a little bit scary in the sense that in 1929, the town purchased the property, and obviously they did a survey at that time. In 1933, they did another survey where they suggested a redevelopment plan. In 1953, the town drew up engineering drawings to construct the new Walnut Street station that's there now. In 1985, the town did a, guess what, area of need of rehabilitation, and they would have to do a survey to see who owns what next to what. And then in 2014, as Mr. Neese referenced, there was a report on a lot division application in which the report says that we don't know who owns the property there. What everybody does know is Mr. Silver's property and the boundaries of that. I would suggest, based on what I've researched, that in fact New Jersey Transit owns the property between Mr. Silver and that's it. There is no Montclair Township. Montclair Township might have a right of way, and they can certainly verify that, but I seriously doubt you own the property. And then the last thing would be, well, you know what? That's good enough for right now. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Call-in user 18-973-818. You're unmuted.
466 is 4665 the last four digits?
Well, I can hear you.
Okay. So, hello. I agree with some of these prior speakers. I think the findings are not correct. I'm concerned about.
I need your name.
Excuse me?
I need your name.
Kathy Rosenberg.
Okay.
I disagree with the findings. The process seems not coherent to me. I take exception with Alan Trembulak's, without knowing much about the situation, his hostile condemnation of Martin Schwartz. And I agree with the architect who just spoke. If we're sure that the 8-story plan is not the plan, where is a copy of the plan? So I don't know how Alan can say with certainty that's not the plan when there is no other plan proposed. So I'm really disappointed with the committee's findings, and I think this needs more serious work here before a decision is made.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Call-in user 4. Your number is 973-747.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is William Scott, co-chair of the Montclair Housing Commission. Is it possible to put the criteria back up again? Because I believe one of the criteria that was on the list dealt with housing, affordable housing.
Tommy,
Is that possible?
Let me go ahead and do that really quick. And this slide is just the paraphrased language, by the way. This is not the full language.
Okay, I understand that. I'll make my point once I see that. Okay.
All right.
Tommy, can you pull up the full report? Do you have that?
The full report, yeah, I can pull that up.
Because I think we have the full language in the report.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Sorry to take you back so far. Well, if you're taking a little time to do that, I'll just make my point, because I kind of agree with Mr. Jacobson and also Mr. Graham. If the opportunity is currently available for the owner to sell the property to a developer, and he builds within the current zoning requirements, that would negate the need of a area of redevelopment plan or study. So that would be one of my first questions, and I would agree with the two planning board members. You know, we seem to be a little bit ahead of ourselves on this situation, because if we're going down the road of an area of redevelopment and a redevelopment plan, I just would want to make sure that there is no easing of the requirement as it's stated in the inclusionary zoning ordinance for affordable housing. Based on, I don't want to go too far back on areas of redevelopment, but some of our prior redevelopment projects, we only ended up with 10% affordable housing, and I want to make sure that we're not in a negotiation process where a possible developer has already presented his financial plan based on the lack of making or committing to the obligation of a 20% set aside. So, if my point being, if the developer went forward with a plan right now, built what was permitted on that property, he would have to be committed to the 20% set aside, and that would be what I would expect. But
We understand, Mr. Scott. There is no plan, Mr. Scott.
Well, there's a reason why this whole process started. And my point being, if there's no plan, the builder or the owner could have sold the property, and the builder could build based on what's permitted on that property today. Okay. And
well, I guess if that could have happened, Mr. Scott, that it would have happened. But we're at this point in the proceedings, we're merely trying to determine whether the property is eligible to be considered, and if and when there's a determination that it is eligible, the planning board will then work on coming up with a plan where your comments will be quite pertinent with respect to the obligations that will be placed on the developer. But right now, we have no plan that we're looking at. No plan has been considered, has been presented to the planning board to consider. So as far as we're concerned, this evening and in this proceeding, we are not dealing with a plan. We have no plan. We're merely trying to determine whether or not statutory requirements are being met for consideration.
I appreciate that and respect that comment. Put a check mark by that box you mentioned that we want to make sure a recommendation can come forth as long as the affordable housing component of this possible area redevelopment is abided by.
Well, Mr. Scott, are you asking if we approve this, could there be a plan that would allow for less affordable housing than is currently statutorily required? Is that the gist of the question?
No, Mr. Scott notes that there could be changes made to that. His point is that he feels that there shouldn't be no diminishment of what is currently required. Correct, Mr. Scott?
That's correct. We don't want to see a reduction of that commitment as it's stated in the inclusionary zoning ordinance.
All
I
right.
hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
If I may, just for the record, I had asked Janice what is the housing component based on the site dimensions, and she said it would be 45 units. So we're talking about at 20%, we're talking about 9 affordable units.
That's currently with the current density. Right. If we decided that something was less or more, then that would of course change up or down.
So you're looking at a change in the neighborhood for 9 affordable units.
Caller number 5, you're unmuted. Number 973202.
Oh, hello.
Hi, I hear
Can
you.
you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Rachel Quinn Egan. I just wanted to say that I really want to second what Ruth Peretti said, and also the architect who spoke straight after her. I'm sorry, I apologize, I forget her name. I am very concerned that our town is not preserving our buildings, that we don't seem to focus on historic preservation. I'm very concerned that we will lose the integrity of that particular area around Walnut Street. And I'm also really confused by the fact that we keep on being told that there is no plan. This is not what we're going to discuss now, but it seems like the only reason we are talking about a redevelopment plan is because some developer is already pushing for this. So, you know, the fact is that residents here, and I've been here almost 20 years, we have a history of just really not trusting what's happening between the town and developers, because we keep on getting extremely ugly high-rise buildings in our town that do not serve us, but serve other people and making people very wealthy. I really am concerned that we are not protected as residents against from these developers. And I'm asking you, please, to keep on asking the hard questions and to make sure that this area is protected, both environmentally and historically, and for people, not for developers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Call-in user 7, number 973477.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, this is Lisanne Renner calling in. One of the first things that really struck me when I was reading this report was the description of things like, you know, flattened gutters as drainage and bumpy sidewalks as tripping hazards and pinch points, which seemed to like describing a lot of parts of Montclair that we aren't currently considering as areas in need of redevelopment. And, you know, the criterion has a lot of strong language like dilapidation, obsolete, unwholesome, which I don't think really does apply to a lot of these buildings. I mean, we're not talking about squalor. You know, a lot of these buildings are rented out. They're very nice, historic buildings with an industrial vibe that's something that we should be embracing rather than, you know, looking away from. So I just, you know, feel that some of this is a little overstated and isn't as bad as it might sound. And what we really have here are some really interesting buildings that contribute to a really good character. That's something that we should be embracing and protecting. And whatever goes forward, whether there is an area in need of redevelopment selected or not, I would hope that we would focus very much on what's good about this area, particularly in terms of the historic buildings. I would hate to see them overlooked in favor of some other kind of development that doesn't emphasize that quality. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, call-in user 8, 207-332.
Hi, this is Ian Kerr. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I just want to start by pointing out, the very terms of the criteria, as the previous caller mentioned, like we know that these are highly manipulable to talk about dilapidation and blight, and that these have been part of countless problematic gentrification efforts to call areas dilapidated or blighted, especially when we're talking, like the previous caller mentioned, about things like a crushed gutter, an uneven sidewalk. And so I think the other part I want to say is that I often work in that area, and I work with tenants in different spaces there as a designer and a maker. I go there almost 3 times a week over the last 5 or 6 years. So it's inaccurate, it's factually untrue, numerous points in the report, especially the ones that were highlighted to draw the conclusion. The pinch point is not what it is referred to. I have driven through it when vans have been parked there. I've ridden my bike through it. I've walked there. What's astonishing about that space, it's a historic building. It's highly used. It's dearly loved by the community. You see children playing in it. You see workshops happening in the parking spot. You see exercise classes. It's flexible. It's important. It allows for light manufacturing and entrepreneurship to happen there. I mean, clearly we're seeing a report that was written, the conclusions were written to come to a conclusion that is not substantiated if you're actually on the ground. There were no engineers involved. There was no studies. It's clearly quickly prepared, as was pointed out by the first page of the report being inaccurate and how it was described. So I think we have to go back. We have to say that this really, the correct conclusion is that the area might need improvement. Let's fix a gutter. Let's fix a sidewalk. We could do that across all of Montclair. But does it need to be redeveloped? No. It doesn't meet any of the criteria if you actually dig into it. There's no dilapidation. There's no vacancy in that sense. The restaurant is usable. When that area builds up, it would become highly viable. It's not stagnant. It's really well used by the public. And then I think the other things to talk about development are, as Ruthie and others said, why are we considering these areas for development when there's environmental issues, when there's such flooding issues? It feels like we have a highly used and effective space that's being mislabeled. And so I think to just end quickly is that it's an astonishing site. It's vital. The facts are incorrect in this report. The conclusion is wrong. And we should perhaps ask the property owner to make some improvements, but there's certainly, it would be absurd to draw the conclusion that this meets the criteria for redevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caroline Kane Levy, I see you're here, but I don't see I can't unmute you. I don't see your microphone. So if you and the others can turn your microphone on, I can unmute you.
It seems we have at least one person towards the end of the list who has their microphone on.
Okay. I have Mr. John Lang. You have your microphone on. Go ahead. Mr. Lang, do you have a comment? I don't hear anything. All right. Miss Baggs, Susan Baggs, I've unmuted you. Susan, if you have a comment. Susan? Okay.
If there's anyone who wishes to be heard and cannot get through, at least please enter your name into the chat so that Janice can at least identify who's trying to get access. You might
I
have to
see.
activate your microphones or something.
So Joseph Shand, I see you want to make you have a comment. Let me try and, you don't have your microphone on, Mr. Shand, so I can't unmute you.
Kevin Dwyer looks like he's trying to gain access.
Kevin Dwyer. Kevin,
Dyer.
yeah, I see Kevin Dyer. Again, I would unmute you, but your microphone's not on.
If you go into if everybody on your screen, at the bottom of your screen, where it has the mute button, there's a little arrow to the right of it. And if you click that arrow, it pulls up a box. And if you go down in that box, there's a thing that says audio settings. And if you click on that audio settings, it'll show you your speaker and your microphone, and your volume level may just be down on the microphone. I know that happens to me often. Where my computer just zeroes it out.
There may also be a connect audio button in place of that drop down that folks might need to hit and go through the mechanics of actually connecting their speakers and microphone first.
Right.
I think what I can do is I can unmute everybody.
And I'm seeing folks starting to pop on now, it looks like, with microphones and speakers attaching.
All right, here we go. I see Eva Brandstadter. I've unmuted you. Miss Brandstadter, Riley? Do you have any comments? Mr. Switzer?
Hi, perfect. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect.
The rest of you keep trying.
Yes, I kept trying. Okay, so again, my name is Gregory Schweitzer for the record, and I am a tenant in the space. And I preface everything prior to going into my list here that the landlord is actually a wonderful person, and I've had nothing but a great relationship with him since I moved in this past February. I'm sorry, February a year ago. I am also an architect. I relocated my office from New York City to this location in February of last year. I signed a 5-year lease to be in that space until, I decide to move on or whatever the case may be. I still have 4 years left on my lease. The landlord has been gracious and has made offers to go into further conversation about that, which is great. The purpose of my comments deal with just what I believe a plan that has been put forward publicly that has not really been truly developed to a point to where it makes sense. As you have all heard, this reoccurring statement, there's been way too many misrepresentations with respect to findings on the site. I'm just going to add my 2 cents. Yes, there's been numerous misrepresentations made with our ability to conduct our businesses there, and it's really a shame. I located my office to this location because of ease of access to the train station. I have customers coming in from New York, Connecticut, all over New Jersey, and it's very convenient. Unfortunately, the commercial stock that would allow a business like ours to thrive in this town really doesn't exist. It's really a very, very rough space to find. Zoning has it to where we can't even rent retail spaces. So that makes it difficult. With respect to the report, this notion of spot rezoning is incredibly short-sighted. You know, whatever you build on that site, and again, I'm very pro-development, you really have to take into consideration everything from Walnut Street all the way to Oak. And this site itself is approximately half the block. And it abuts other pseudo industrial buildings all the way up to Montclair Bread, and perhaps 2 residential units on Forest. Knowing that the tennis bubble customer says that he's not looking to redevelop his site, that's all fine. However, we all know what happens once we start redeveloping space, particularly near transportation nodes. You're going to find that it is going to be just that much more desirable, and you're going to find other landowners in that immediate area all the way across to Walnut Street wanting to do certain improvements as well. As I understand it, Label Street has parking lots basically backed up against the street itself, where the main retail is on Walnut Street. That's all fine, but there will come a time and day that those things will have to be addressed. And, you know, any plan that we put in place should really consider all of those attributes, the park included. Surprisingly, there's no information about flood zones. How can you even go about considering redevelopment when you have a very active watershed there and it has been prone to flooding? These things should be all tied into any plan that's put out there for future redevelopment. And with respect to the remediation, I've been there for a year. I've seen people testing. I don't see anybody remediating anything. So there needs to be a very clear and public remediation plan in place. I don't think that the report showed exactly what that means. There were statements about pinch points. That is a access pathway in between the back of the building and the waterway that is there. There is no vehicle whatsoever that backs up into any portion of that building at any given time into the building. So that is an inaccurate statement. All of those garages and workshops are completely packed with equipment and or active workspaces for the companies that utilize them. That includes the furniture company, which I think one was alluding to. Yes, you're correct. The site has some maneuverability issues, perhaps, but I think that a lot of that could be remediated if the parking lot was just simply striped and giving directionals. Right now, that doesn't exist. The edge of the sidewalk or the edge of the hard surfaces that are there, of which I believe the whole site is pretty much covered with asphalt, where there isn't a building, it creates a lot of runoff into the canal. That, I'm sure, is not an environmentally positive thing. And also along that edge, that where there was a notice of the asphalt breaking, it's simply because of the constant breaches of the canal and the washout of the earth underneath the asphalt along that water edge. So those things happen. Again, you know, I wouldn't have relocated my office from New York City if the building was a dump. And it's certainly habitable. In fact, I have an incredibly nice space, and I was available to be visited on the date of which we were told that there were people coming, and there was a choice not to come by my office. And it's a shame, because I think that you would have seen yet another really attractive and very interesting space with nearly 20-foot ceiling heights, with beautiful architectural finishing and furniture and finished floors and tons of natural light. The space that was shown without windows, that's a one-off in the building, and that's not a common thing. So again, there's so many flaws with the report. Again, I'd like to see this property redeveloped. I don't have any issue with that. But I think that in order to do that properly, you need to have facts set forward and shared with the public to where everyone truly understands the real state of the property and the potential that the current structure has there now and its viability to Montclair as a whole. That's it.
Thank you.
Jason Axman?
Yes, hello.
Yes, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Hi.
Good evening.
Good evening, members, members of the public. Thanks for this platform. So I'm also a tenant in this building. I believe I am the most longtime tenant there at approaching 30 years, which I think kind of qualifies me to speak about the building or its history at any rate. You know, I just want to agree with, you know, some of the sentiments, for starters, mentioned by the other business owners. This is a vibrant community. I guess the word, I don't have the report fresh in my mind, but the word dilapidated keeps coming up. Apparently that word was used in the report. I'm also curious, and apologies, I sort of missed the beginning of the party. What prompted what was the genesis that prompted you all to be looking into this for redevelopment to begin with? So, and I think the other gentleman was asking about the affordable housing and that the criterion or the was met, was also saying if this had been a normal sort of sale and you know, under normal zoning, that this shouldn't have come up. It shouldn't have triggered this redevelopment. I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong. At any rate, I don't. Yeah, I think that the report mischaracterizes the building egregiously in terms of, it's certainly my experience there. As I say, I've been there for 30 years, and it has kind of been known as a haven for the artistic and the creative. Whether, you know, that's a value that this town has, I guess, you know, is remains to be seen, and I'm not sure that that makes a compelling argument, but I hope it does. I myself, by the way, I'm a maker, and I think I provide the town with a rather unique service over the past 30 years as an old home restorer and a custom cabinet maker. And over the years, as part of my process, I bring all my clients to my space there. I'm quite proud of my space. It's a beautiful, unique, old industrial space. And as part of my process, I bring my clients there to see their works in progress. So just, you know, I can't agree with the notion that it's, you know, that adjective that keeps coming up, dilapidated. Certainly my space is not. It's dusty because it's a workshop, but it is vibrant, I would say, along with the rest of my community. And I have been happily ensconced there for 30 years. And I think I provide a unique and valuable service to the community. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Godlewski?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I agree with many of the people from the community, the neighborhood, who have expressed their concerns, and Ruth Peretti and Petya Morozov, who has a fabulous architecture studio there that I've visited many times. And to what they've said, I add that this particular neighborhood's meeting the criteria for an area in need of redevelopment is subjective, and I feel it's impertinent. The redevelopment remedies offered by the strategy are really not consistent with that type of redevelopment and natural methodologies that happen organically in that particular reviving neighborhood. That area organically developed into a Soho-like vibe neighborhood because of the adaptive reuse of the old buildings and the creative thinking of the business owners. The big new buildings will destroy that atmosphere that's so genuinely Montclair. That area came back to life thanks to some local individuals, and it's a charming quarter that works fine just the way it is. And from a preservation standpoint, the subject properties meet all 5 criteria of historic preservation and designation, and I respectfully ask the planning board to evaluate those 5 criteria for the preservation. And I could read all of them to you, but I'm sure you know what they are, and that's really the work of the HPC. But thank you very much, and I think it's a beautiful neighborhood. It really is, and I really commend everyone and their talents and hard work to get it the way it is today. It's just fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lang, you're unmuted. I'm going to give you another opportunity. Mr. Shands, you're unmuted.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to make a statement. So I appreciate the calls, the statements from a couple people earlier, so I won't reiterate completely what they said, and I'll just kind of address around what they've already stated. But I don't think that the property, and I'm particularly speaking to property 1 about this, meets the criteria for redevelopment. If anything, it's been stated before, it needs to just be rehabilitated in terms of the traffic patterns and stormwater management, new interior layouts. I'm a firm believer that if a building can be saved, it should be. It's not unlike the other buildings just across from Tony's Brook that have also been properly rehabilitated and turned into vibrant office and light industrial buildings, where Montclair Bread Company is located. So I think this property, the 2 buildings can also follow suit. So my second point is, following that, the zoning should stay as it is. It provides a vital need for the neighborhood and Montclair as a whole, where office space is in desire, is in such need, and small hardworking businesses need spaces to thrive in. These properties really provide those spaces, as we've heard from so many others. Providing that space of a work-live environment. Many of those tenants, they live in Montclair, they work in Montclair, so we should encourage that kind of work-live environment, not create a mechanism or allow a mechanism that could, in the future sometime, encourage either gentrification or a new structure that would really become, could really destroy the character of the neighborhood. Something that doesn't fit, is out of scale, is not in the right kind of density. Yes, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go back to the telephone numbers because I think some people called in. So I'm going with who couldn't get on. Call-in user 21, number 347419. You're unmuted.
Hi. Hi, yes, thank you. This is Adam Grace. As an observer over the years, it feels like it doesn't take too much to call something an area in need of redevelopment when the town or a developer is intent on doing that.
And while I can't speak to the merits of the report, the layperson, when you read a broad sentence like outdated and unmaintained drainage facilities can be found throughout the site, and the only specific evidence is a photo of an otherwise okay-looking downspout with a crumpled end, you know, I don't know what to think. And I heard the lawyer for the property owner tell the board that you have to act on the facts in the study because that's all you have in front of you. And I seriously doubt that that's actually your duty, as opposed to seeking out whatever additional facts that you need. The main concern I have here is why this is happening and why the town is doing this. And I know that there's been a lot of points made about how you can't put the cart before the horse. And as a member of the public that's been in town for over 20 years, the main concern I have is this is happening because the developer wants a carriage drawn by a horse. And once you get to the plan, everybody knows the horse is out of the barn. And the reason the horse is out of the barn is because the zoning restrictions have been lifted by virtue of you having already declared the area as one in need of redevelopment. And while I understand the potential benefits to the town, that negotiations can be a two-way street, the town maybe can ask for things that it couldn't get. The reality is legislation is the best protection. Legislation can't be negotiated. And once the legislation of the zoning is removed, all the leverage goes to the developer. The town has given up its core leverage that it has over this property. And as the study mentions, there's some significant important protections in the zoning. It's a 3-story limit. There's bulk requirements. The master plan has already said that those restrictions are important for the area, and that's all gone out the window before anybody, neither the member of the public or the full board, has any indication as to exactly what the developer has in mind. And I realize that maybe that's just the nature of the process, but that seems to be a problem. And I do wonder to what extent, as somebody already said, the developer and maybe people in the planning department already know what the ask is. They already know what really the person wants to develop. And it's not like anybody's ever come before the planning board under the current zoning with a plan that just can't be done based on current zoning. And so I would ask the board 2 things. Number 1, get whatever facts you feel you need to make the appropriate decision. And number 2, by all means, please do not throw the zoning restrictions that are very important out the window. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Caller number 27, 862-224, you're unmuted.
Yes, good evening. Martin Schwartz. I wanted to get to the, the basis behind some of the conclusions made here today and the motivations for attempting to create an area of redevelopment at the site. And I think the planner can answer a good number of these. I'll try and do as quickly as possible. You confirmed that the property owners at issue or impacted came to the council finance committee because there was a contract vendee in the wings who wanted to buy the property and apparently wanted to add more significant bulk and density than the existing structures, and that effectively a redevelopment plan would bypass the existing zoning codes and bypass potentially the current historic preservation criteria. Criteria which could prevent any expanded development at the site if those buildings were designated as local preservation sites. Isn't that correct? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. Did not the developers come before the finance committee or come to the finance committee and request a review of the site?
I was not at that meeting. I was informed from the members of the finance committee that the developers came in, they had a discussion. And at the end, and I don't know what was said, I was not party to it, but I was told that that was the genesis of the resolution, that was the genesis of this process. And that's it.
Got it. Good. Okay, so the developers met with the mayor, Councilor Hurlock, and ostensibly Councilor Cummings, and the result of that was a proposal put forth at the council to study whether an area of redevelopment is warranted at the site. Okay. Did any of those developers come to you subsequently to express that same sentiment and that they wanted to expand the footprint at the site?
Yes, I reached out to the contract purchaser to get a feel for what direction they were going in, and I met with them in my office.
Excellent. Excellent.
And they didn't have anything. They had prototypes of projects that they had built in other municipalities, but basically they want a mixed-use building, is what they told me.
Got it. Got it. Have any other property owners in the area, such as the owner of the soccer dome or any other developers, talked to you about an area of redevelopment in this area? And as the chair said, since designating two sites, two property lots to start and a plan then created pull in other properties nearby to expand development, have any other developers in the area discussed an area of redevelopment with you for this particular Walnut Station area?
I'm going to respond that no, I have not discussed redevelopment in this area with any other developers.
Got it. Have any developers or the developers that discussed creating a parking deck in the surface parking lot in the future if an area of redevelopment is created?
Not since
Martin, excuse me, but you're asking a lot of questions about what developers' plans there might be and such. But again, our focus with this hearing this evening is whether or not this particular property meets the criteria set out by the statute to be qualified as an area of redevelopment. And whether or not a developer had any conversation with anybody about that does not impact whether or not the property actually meets the criteria or not. It is 10 minutes to 11. Wait a minute. It is 10 minutes to 11 in the evening, okay? There are other people who want to be heard, and we still have to discuss what we're going to do. So again, I would ask you that if you have an opinion or if you have a point that you want to make, please make the point.
John, I can understand that,
Miss Talley is not on trial here, and to be cross-examined as to how this matter came before her. She is doing her job because the council asked the planning board to review this, okay? And whatever went on before that is not relevant to our decision about whether or not this property meets the statutory criteria.
Well, John, I would have to disagree with that because
but unfortunately,
I'm speaking now.
But
John,
I run the meeting. No, Martin, I run the meeting, okay? You have indicated, wait a minute, you have indicated that you don't agree with me. That's fine. However, I run the meeting, all right?
That's fine.
So
I'm trying to
please
explain to you why my questions are relevant.
I'm not really interested in why you disagree with me. I would like you to make your point to tell us about the decision that we have to make this evening so that the rest of the people can be heard and we can carry on with the business of this meeting. All right, now can you do that?
I can, but I had some questions that related to the formation of the report and the veracity of the report. And as Ms. Talley said, that her conclusions are indeed her own. And so getting to why she wrote the report in such a way.
Do you think that you're going to get anybody to admit that, oh, they had an untoward motive in writing a report, even Ms. Talley or anybody else? Do you expect by answering those questions that you're going to get them to admit that on the record? If you do, Martin, you're delusional. Why don't you just give us your opinion about what you think happened so that we can get your opinion on what we should do this evening?
John?
And stop playing attorney. Can you do that? Can you do that, Martin? If not,
Yes,
we will mute you.
Yes, I can.
Please proceed.
Okay. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, I'll get to the point. We have 6 train stations that already bring people into our neighborhoods, not just one. We don't need the planning vision of transit-oriented development here, which is the basis, one of the main bases within the report. For Montclair, that is overdevelopment. And the report and the planner continue to advocate that, even though the majority of residents have shown they don't want it, given the reaction of residents when 7 to 12-story buildings were first proposed. And so there is a fundamental flaw in the foundational basis for the AINR recommendation today. Second, the planner's report, the results fail to mention that the 2 factory buildings at issue, which would be up for knockdown if this is approved ultimately, are part of the proposed Walnut Street Commercial Historic District. It's strange that that's not in the report, but that's a fundamental flaw. Another flaw in the report is that the criteria used do not mention historic preservation as part of the New Jersey planning statutes that she referred to. She only picks the statute that shows intensive development, but Section 9 of those same criteria also advocate preservation as a main criteria, and that was also left out of the report, which is a fundamental flaw in the conclusions of the report. In contrast to what Mr. Trembulac said, and I give him his admirable defense of his client's interests. Unfortunately, he chose to use personal attacks against me to advocate for those interests. Councilor Peter Iacobellis admitted today that members of the council had seen that proposed 8-story rendering and that was reviewed by real estate interests. And so that is a factor in consideration. It's not unlikely, based on past experience here, that this kind and level of development would be advocated down the road. And since there is nothing on the table today, no plan, it's not an unreasonable suggestion when this was rendered that indeed this kind of building might be proposed, given the fact that the planner in her 2015 master plan recommendations asserted that we should have 7 to 12-story buildings around train stations, and that her overall planning philosophy is for this transit-oriented development, which is not really appropriate for Montclair because, as Jeff Jacobson said, we have 6 train stations. We really don't need it. As to the Richie Cesare restaurant, could not the council use eminent domain powers over the years if it was so concerned that it was vacant and sitting there, it was in litigation, it was such a terrible thing? Clearly, a restaurant did not work there long term. It could be turned into an office building. It could be turned into a tech site. There's no need to knock that building down. And so this is much to do about nothing, really, in my opinion, to generate much more development. And again, as many people have said here, the study really only describes the negatives seen by the planner to support knockdowns ultimately, which gets to the very heart of the philosophy behind this, not that we should preserve these buildings as others have called in and said, because they're lovely old factory buildings and part of the organic redevelopment of the Wall Street area, but they reflect the planner's bias towards intensive, large bulk train station related development, which is clearly inappropriate for the township. One of our land use goals is to preserve open space feeling. And this proposed AINR and the next study coming for the parking lot will indeed, no doubt, result in a parking deck in that lot, because that's what the development interests want here. So it's a perfectly reasonable conclusion that indeed a parking deck will become on the table to support the overdevelopment that this AINR will spur on if it's approved. We will end up losing potentially the open farmers market space in that time. So that's really, other than the fact that if this is approved, it's not just approving these two particular lots. It will end up spurring on a rush to speculation and overdevelopment in the area, and will ruin the organic vibe and the rehabbing that has occurred organically over the years within these old structures around the Walnut Street area. It will ultimately start the drumbeats of overdevelopment and kill what has happened there. So those are my comments, John. I again disagree with you. The foundation of the planners in
Martin, please, it's almost 11 o'clock. Can you really spare us the editorial? Can you spare us the editorial and let's hear what the other people here who would like to say.
John,
okay?
You in particular need the editorial.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay. I will ignore the mischaracterizations that were mentioned, but I would like to say that nowhere in the discussion do we talk about knocking down buildings. You know, it evaluates existing conditions. The other item is, you talk about eminent domain. The only way you can use eminent domain is through redevelopment. So, I guess, John, you want to continue with the callers, right?
Yes, please.
Caller number 29,
Just a point
917.
of information, how many more callers are waiting to speak?
1, 2, 3, 4. At least 4.
Thank you.
I think well, I am on the line. Can you hear me, Janice?
Yes. Who's this?
This is Susan Baggs. I'm going to go forward.
Okay.
Susan Baggs, BAGGS. As I am so happy to see some familiar faces from the planning board. It's nice to see you all. I'm glad that you're all hale and hearty. Nice to see some newcomers as well. I served for several years on the Board of Adjustment. For those of you who do not know, I'm a resident of the town for over 20 years. I'm an architect by training and profession. And I encourage the planning board to not accept this report and to not forward it or recommend it to the town council. I'm not going to repeat any of the earlier comments, with most of which I agree with, but I would like to call out that I believe William Scott's concerns about the affordable housing in the town, that really resonates with me. It's affordable housing in this town disappears as quickly as it is furnished. This neighborhood, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah, so it disappears as quickly as it's furnished. This site is on the edge of, there are many two-family owner-occupied dwellings around it, and I am concerned about the impact of declaring an area in need of redevelopment on those neighboring properties, and the negative impact that will occur once the study would be forwarded. Because one of the well-known tactics of developers is to ensure that the properties become vacant and they hold to ransom local governments in order to strong arm projects that otherwise would not have been built. The zoning that was that applies here is extremely flexible. It's very well suited to the town, and it has in fact helped support the growth that has happened over the past 10, 15 years. I am so grateful to all of the creative people and business owners who have worked so hard to make this a successful area, and it is a slap in the face that the town council and the finance committee would not reach out first to all of you and get your opinion about even whether to launch this whole extravaganza. Just some final points. It would be very helpful to have some flood mitigation measures analyzed. I don't feel that it would be necessary to have this kind of study launched in order to do that. We don't need to unravel the good work that has been done. But if this thing is put forward, don't be surprised, new planning board members, what the outcome will be. There will be construction. There will be a lot of construction. And if you have looked around town and seen what has happened in the aftermath of these areas of need of development, what you will see is construction that will last depending on the extent of what is planned finally. Some of the people have alluded to, well, it would give us more control. We could add on other properties. We could expand the area. It's very vague what is going to happen. But in an area like this, where you have difficult foundation issues, there's going to be a very long discovery period. There will be probes and test bores. There will be a large construction fence, encompassing this site. Just the excavation alone will last, 2 years with all the dewatering that you'll have to do here. Imagine the traffic and the heavy vehicles coming to this site with hundreds of workers. This is an area where there are 4 schools nearby. Can you imagine having a large area with a major building project in it being serviced in the heart of Montclair, where currently, the high schoolers are walking or riding their bikes from the south end of town up to the high school through this? I mean, just to take off the rose-colored glasses of what Seymour Street is and think about what the implications are here in this area. This is an unusual site, and it's right in the middle of everything. Sidewalks and roads are going to be closed when they rip up the utilities to try to fix everything. It's going to be really noisy. It's going to last for years because it's right next to the train station, and we don't know whether additional properties next to the train station are going to be added to this. Don't be surprised if there are, maybe New Jersey Transit wants to do something. Maybe access to the train station is difficult for a year. I don't want to be alarmist, but I am worried about what will happen to Walnut Street train station during this construction. The disruption to local businesses is already happening, as you heard earlier from my colleague architect, who I would love to meet sometime. The businesses who are not even within the footprint of it, they're going to be affected. Who is going to want to hang out next to the noise and dirt and grime of construction vehicles coming to and from the work site? And you know, at the end of this, we'll end up with something that looks like Anywhere USA. You know, people say, oh, we're not going to tear down the beautiful buildings. We're not going to, but you know where this is going. And I don't think any of us should pretend otherwise. I think this is an outrageous abuse of power. I think this is a continuation of policies that ignore the social justice issues, ignore all of those two-family owner-occupiers who live in the area. And I just can't believe that people continue to support the notion of pilot tax breaks to developers. We know right now.
Ms. Bagg, I mean, there are other people who want to be heard.
I just think it's a bad idea.
I think we get the idea.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Caller number 30, you are unmuted and you're trying to look for your phone number.
Hello?
Yes.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Let's make a voice.
What's your name?
Okay. So my name is Kevin Dyer. I'm a lifelong resident of Montclair and a product of Montclair Public Schooling. I'm appealing to you all today as an environmentalist and a housing affordability advocate to please recommend the AINR designation for this site. I know it's a little bit different from what you've been hearing so far. If this town wishes to take seriously its climate commitments, approving a redevelopment plan that allows for dense housing, walkable development near transit should be its #1 priority. Study after study has proven that dense land use of this type has the smallest carbon footprint of any type of land use. And from an affordability standpoint, approving the redesignation is vital for people of my generation if we ever hope to be able to afford living in this great town. It's no secret that Montclair is becoming unaffordable, but the solution for this is quite simple. Build more housing. Housing vacancy rates are directly correlated with housing prices in towns or cities and cities where the supply of housing supersedes its demand. Housing prices decline. This is seen in Jersey City. It's seen in many cities around the country. So I really think it's imperative if this planning board wishes to address the issues of sustainability and affordability that it recommends this designation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller number 32, 201-362, you're unmuted.
Thank you.
Can you give us your name?
We hear an echo, but we can't hear anything else.
Give us your name.
Oh, sorry. It's Kathleen Bennett.
Oh, hi, Kathleen. I hear you.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry.
Kathleen Bennett?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Kathleen.
Yes. Hi. Hi. Kathleen Bennett, HPC member.
Kathleen, can you turn off your computer or whatever? You're on their phone.
Turn your volume down. Yeah.
Kathleen Bennett, HPC. Hold on.
Your computer or whatever. You're on their phone.
Turn your volume down.
Hold on.
Oh, Kathleen? Are you on your phone?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you
Is
now.
that better? Yes. I've turned off the sound, I think.
Just let's charge forward and keep your voice up.
Sorry, I know it's late. HPC, well, no, this is still on.
Charge forward.
Sorry, I know it's late. There we go. Okay, Kathleen Bennett, HPC member. And I know it's extremely late, but before you go into deliberations, and again, thank you. I know sometimes it's tough to be in the public eye and keep your composure, but you've managed it well. But tonight we've heard from a number of people with connections to the Walnut Street area. And they've all spoken about the vibrancy, the creativity, and the walkability of this area. And I believe it's because it's user-friendly. And the reason it's user-friendly is that it's low density, there's open space with the park. Yes, it's a parking lot, but it's open space. We know that Depot Square is coming in with a restaurant. Walnut Street is lined with restaurants. Used to go to Richie Cesare's when it was open, and I thought it was a great restaurant. I never felt that it was too enclosed. I think that's a building that can certainly be readapted, rehabbed, and reused. I just would like to remind your board that the Walnut Street and the Walnut Street, all the area is in the Walnut Street historic area. So this area is a unique architectural identity, and it's known for its association with the development of the railroad and the nearby commuter housing. It has a number of industrial buildings, and also the historic district has really done a good job. The proposed historic district, Walnut Street, they've done a great job in keeping it down and low, keeping that gritty feel, keeping the industrial feel. So I just would like your members to remember that as you look forward to decide whether this should go into an area of redevelopment. And with that, I'll say good night. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay. Call in user 33-201-245.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Miller, and I'll try and be as succinct as I can. I have been trying to make sense of this process, and as I understand it, what you're trying to do today is to decide whether you believe these sites qualify under the criteria that have been discussed as an area for redevelopment. And I've also tried to take on board the notion that you're evaluating whether it satisfies those criteria in the absence of a plan. And I've been trying to make sense of that as I think other people listening in have been trying to make sense of it, because I think to many of us, it seems odd, awkward, frankly, backwards to think about whether you want to remove the zoning restrictions that are currently applicable in the absence of a known plan. And the only way that I can get my arms around that is to believe that this notion of designating an area for redevelopment is intended for areas that are truly dilapidated, that would not otherwise be adaptable or redeveloped to productive uses, and that it's an extreme measure, an extreme position, an extreme decision that needs to be taken in order to generate some sustainable redevelopment in an area that otherwise would continue to be dilapidated, abandoned, or however you want to think about it. And if that's the case, this area does not meet that characterization. This is a vibrant area, as other people have already described it. It has a lot of owner-occupied leased space that is being productively utilized under the current zoning scheme. It is not an area that is crying out for removal of zoning restrictions in order to generate some useful purpose. It is currently vibrant and would remain vibrant in the absence of being designated. And so I think it's a huge mistake to consider using what I would call a pretext in order to remove the zoning restrictions and encourage growth and development that aren't otherwise necessary for this area. And I think pretext is really the operative word here, because when I looked at the pictures in the report and heard the discussion of the findings of the planning department, what occurred to me was it was advocacy. It wasn't a report that presented pros and cons. It was truly advocacy that was geared towards generating a specific outcome, which was the finding by this board that the area met the criteria. When I would have hoped that there have been a more balanced presentation that would allow the board to kind of use its discretion to reason through whether this type of designation was truly mandated, required under the facts and circumstances presented. And, you know, one of the reasons I think it truly was a pretext was a lot of the things that were cited in the report were things that could have been solved by mere enforcement of local ordinances or zoning. And if you want to take an observation that is in violation of code or ordinance or zoning and use that as a pretext for finding that it satisfies the criteria for redevelopment, I think you could probably do that in 90% of the township of Montclair. And I think that falls with, that's consistent with the notion that other people had, which is say, look, you can look at those criteria and you can structure them like a rubber band to basically designate any part of Montclair an area that requires redevelopment. And that, again, would be an abuse of the process. So I think what I would ask is that the board look to its heart and say, look, is this really the kind of dilapidated, abandoned, decomposing real estate that requires this designation in order to encourage some semblance of vitality, or is this actually currently a very vibrant and vital business area that doesn't require or need that type of designation unless your real motivation is to generate potentially additional tax revenues or some other benefits that really aren't the purpose of what we're trying to do here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got two more. Caller number 35. If you turn down your volume so that we can hear you. Caller 35 93650. Thank you.
It's quite a delay.
Yeah, I know. I don't think.
Maybe we should move on to the next caller. This isn't going away.
Yeah.
All right. Caller number 36, 973-224.
Yes, my name is Ricardo. Yes, hello, my name is Ricardo Pino. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'd like to say that I'm one of the homeowners of one of these houses right behind the property here for almost 20 years. And there have been several points that, quite frankly, have been mind-boggling to me. I'd like to say that I find the report, for the most part, accurate. I haven't been inside the building, so I cannot speak to the inside of the building. But I will say that there's several issues to me that I think redevelopment could address and should address. I will never be one that would say that I would necessarily trust the developer without kind of seeing their plans and really having more discussion. But having said that, we know that for the past X amount of years that this property has been owned, there's really been no improvements for the things that I'm about to talk about. I know that there are several tenants of the business there that have seen or made improvements, and I can appreciate that. Having said that, though, I've been privileged for the last 20 years to see the backside of a building that is basically does nothing to the appeal, does nothing for my children who've lived here, who've grown up here, and does nothing for the safety of the street. We have a street on Erie there that, in essence, we have cars whipping through there all the time. There's no stop sign coming in from Erie. There's no visibility because you have a huge block of a building that prevents visibility coming from there, and you don't know who owns that. So to me, something along the lines of, yes, creating a pedestrian walkway on the part of the property that you can establish ownership for would make much more sense for the safety of the residents that live in that community. And therefore, kind of without having to, if there's any issues of establishing ownership, you know right away that that can directly impact the safety and viability of the people that live in that neighborhood. I also find it kind of interesting that we have people talking about the potential gentrification of a neighborhood, and a lot of the people that are making those statements are professionals like architects talking about gentrification of a neighborhood that for the most part is a street full of residential houses of middle income residents, and kind of making those assertions when again it strikes me as kind of the improvements are made facing towards one portion of the property, but the entire backside is left with nothing in terms of safety, nothing in terms of any kind of viability for the homeowners that are there. In terms of the parking lot at the end of the street, I will tell you from having lived here for 20 years that overnight there are cars not just double parked, there's cars triple parked over there with cars parked on the sideways. There is a cutout to allow cars to go in and out, but since there's always cars double parked or triple parked back there, more often than not what you will see is people driving over the sidewalk or driving through the cutout for the pedestrian walkway and driving through there at all hours of the day and night. And so to me, I'm not going to say without seeing someone's actual plans that I can fully support anything like that. But at the very least, approving a plan to go forward to say, look, there has to be something done. The owner of this property has not done what's needed to be done for the last few decades. So if there's any way we can support moving forward with the notion of improving the safety and the viability for the people who are the residents who have to live here, not just work here, but live here, I'd say go for it. And I understand why there's people trying to stop that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, I have one more. Caller number 38. You're unmuted?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is John Sullivan calling. I'm glad that I'm going after the last person who just spoke because I feel like I want to speak in reflection to what he was saying and kind of walk a middle line here. I don't think it needs to be designated as an area in need of redevelopment, but at the same time, I get frustrated because I do feel like it is sometimes that is what we come to rely upon to have to fix something or stay with it exactly the way it is. I feel like that area, I've been back there. I think a lot of the light industrial uses are wonderful. The retail and the floor level there should stay, but that we have an obligation to maximize our fortunate nature of having multiple train stations and this being so close to it that I wish it didn't have to be all or nothing all the time, where these come in at 8 or 10 stories or whatever they were, and either we're arguing about being Hoboken or staying exactly the same. I think that, I wish there was more of a middle ground where people would come forward with plans that added 2 or 3 stories on top of what is already there that's great, and that pedestrian access and bikeability around it and walkability around it was better. There's a lot to be desired about what the condition of Erie Park is and has been as a public space that doesn't get addressed. And it seems we have to wait for packaging all these parcels together for a developer to come in order to do anything, which is ridiculous because Walnut Street, I'm a tremendous fan of, love it, but there's definitely some spaces where we need to fix. And I hope that I wish we could come up with some kind of thing where it doesn't have to be either you get this complete designation or it stays exactly the same. Not that there's an option for that, but perhaps that's just my opinion, where we should create. Thanks for the time. I know it's late, and have a good rest of the night.
All right. Thank you.
That's
it?
Well, I just got one more.
Okay.
Call-in number user 39.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi. This is Caroline Kane Levy. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm a former member of the HBC. I just wanted to say that the study being presented tonight is a bad solution in search of a problem. Its conclusions, identifying the site as an area of need of redevelopment seem cherry-picked and manipulated for a predetermined conclusion. They ignore the New Jersey state planning guidelines, which call for the preservation of historic buildings. They ignore the fact that the site was included in a historic preservation survey and are part of a proposed Walnut Street Commercial Historic District contained in the historic preservation elements of the Township Master Plan. This faulty study only describes negatives to support demolition of at least 2 interesting historic industrial buildings, which contribute to the special character of the town of Montclair. The study identifies a building fully occupied by approximately 15 small businesses as being obsolete and dilapidated, and calls for the Richie Cesare building, calls it as unusable when it's easily adaptively reused, perhaps not as a restaurant, but maybe an office building, an artist co-op, or a small business incubator. A more sophisticated report would recognize and encourage these types of varied occupancies, which the current zoning allows and the master plan supports, rather than bend to developers' desires for maximum profit to the detriment of the town. The current zoning calls for light industrial and mixed use with low-scale buildings, and it's been working. The Walnut and Label Street area has evolved and grown organically to one of the most vital and interesting areas of Montclair. Throwing out the current zoning will irrevocably change the nature of this fragile yet blossoming district. It will hurt the beloved farmers market and will invite out-of-scale development, negatively affecting current residents and businesses. In addition, the area is a former industrial site and has potential to let loose an environmental disaster if excavated. And I'm tired of fighting one bad scheme after another, and hope you will use your good sense to recognize this ill-conceived push for redevelopment as a non-starter. Just thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I think we're done.
Okay. Well, members of the board, I'm going to take my own advice and I'll get right to my point. In doing what we were charged to do this evening, and that is making a determination with respect to whether or not the properties in question meet the statutory requirements. It's my opinion, based on everything that I've heard this evening and seen, that we're not quite there. While, there are elements of the property that, do fit the requirements, there are other aspects of what's going on with respect to its current usage and the quality of the issues, such that I really don't think it meets the statutory requirements as outlined in order to be classified as an area in redevelopment. So that's my opinion. And given that it's 11:27, I would make a motion that's what we communicate to the council with respect to this property.
I would second that motion.
I third it.
All right.
Do we need to speak, or we can?
You have 5 seconds, Janice. Yeah.
Do you want me to do the roll call?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Vice Chair Brodock?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes to say no. Mr. Graham?
Correct.
Sorry.
Agrees with the motion.
With the motion.
Right. Yeah. Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Ian Wally?
Yes.
Ms. Lockman?
If you mean yes, it does not meet their criteria, then I'm saying yes.
That's what we mean.
Mr. Pierre?
Yes.
Counselor Schlager?
I have to say that I came into this evening thinking that I was going to support it, but having listened to so many people tonight, that I'm going to have to say yes to what Mr. Nguyen said.
Ms. Willis?
I agree with the motion. Yes.
All right. So that, I don't think I need to use the alternates. Oh, yes, I do, because we have one, Mr. Jacobson.
Yes, John Wynn is a wise man.
Okay. All right. I think it was unanimous.
I think so too.
All right. So I think, Arthur, if you and I can prepare a resolution to the planning board, I mean, to the council. And right now, I don't have anything on the agenda for April 25th, so our next meeting won't be until May 9th, and that'll be in person. Okay?
Yep.
All right, I need a motion. Do I have bills?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, I know it was a long evening.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your
Thank you. Good
attention
night.
and your participation. And well done. Have a great evening. See you next time in person.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.